Dhyaya nityam mahesham rajata girinibham charu chandravatamsam ratna kalpojvalangam parshumar gavara bhiti hastam prasannam padmasinam samantat stutam amaraganarvagakityam vasanam vishwadyam vishwabijam nikhila bayaharam panchavaktram trinetram. Om, I meditate upon that five-faced Shiva from whose faces flow forth the agamas. I pray to that reality. I meditate eternally on the great Lord who shines like a mountain of silver adorned with the crescent moon, whose limbs flash as if ornamented. I meditate upon him who sits in the lotus posture, absorbed in the deepest meditation, serene and ecstatic. All around him, bands of yogis, asuras and devas are praising him and singing hymns. In his forearms he holds an axe, a deer, assures fearlessness and grants boons. He is the ground upon which the universe rests and the source from which it springs forth. He is that shining light of consciousness, the destroyer of all fear. I pray to that five-faced, three-eyed Shiva. Karpura Gauram Karunavataram Samsarasaram Bhujagendraharam Sadavasantam Hridayaravinде Bhavam Bhavani Sahitam Namami Kailasapirtasana Madhya Sangstam Bhaktaischa Nandyadhibhisevyamanam Bhaktartidavanalamaprameyam Dhyaye Dhumalingita Vishwarupam. Om Namah Shivaya. Once Sri Ramakrishna had this vision of a light shooting out of Varanasi, the sacred city of Shiva, and landing in the place in Kolkata where Swami Vivekananda would be born. There's a strong link between Swami Vivekananda, of course, and Kashi Vishwanath or Varanasi. But in that city, the sacred city of Lord Shiva, my favorite city in the world, there is a temple called the Vireshwara temple. Even now it's there. And there's where people pray for children. So Vivekananda's mother was doing penances through a relative actually in that temple. And one day she had a dream that Vireshwara Shiva came and said, I will be born in your womb. Later she would say, I thought Shiva himself would come, but instead he sent one of his demons. She said. Anyway, so the link between Vivekananda and Shiva is an obvious one. It was clear in Sri Ramakrishna's vision who Vivekananda was, one of the Sapta Rishis, absorbed in deep meditation, one of the Angshas or partial manifestations or full manifestation of Shiva. One brother disciple was sleeping on the same cot with him inside a mosquito net, woke up in the middle of the night and saw like 8 baby Shivas. It's a weird vision, but like 8 little boy Shivas in the place of where Vivekananda was sleeping. So the 8 forms of Shiva, the 8 Bhairavas, all contained within the one Shiva, who is Vivekananda. So today is an exceedingly important day for our lineage. So I'm just going to chant now to Swami Vivekananda, that Vireshwara Shiva, who is dancing the Tandava, the dance of destruction all around the world, destroying the illusion of duality. Om Paratatve Sadalino Ramakrishna Samagyaya Yo Dharma Sthapanarato Viresham Tam Namamyaham. Om, salutations to that great hero, Vireshwara Shiva, Viresham. I praise that hero who is ever absorbed in the non-dual absolute, Paratatve Sadalino, who is eternally dissolved in the supreme reality, Paratatve Sadalino. He who establishes the dharma by the command of his master. May this be an offering to him. Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. Salutations to the prince amongst ascetics, Swamine Tapaharine, the performer of terrific austerities. Salutations to that great master, Vivekananda. May this be an offering to that general in this army. Om, we lay down our life at his lotus feet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Om peace, peace, peace. Dharma. And the work that this great hero started on this day in 1893 continues with gusto. And that's because you're all here. So thank you all so very much for coming. Let me say a few things about why this day is so special and how I intend to celebrate it with you and commemorate it with you today. But first, Hi, everyone. Jaima, Jaima, Jaima. I miss you all so much. You cannot understand the force of my longing, Jaima. Yes, Kalidasi Ma, your hair looks so nice today. All done up. Hey, Yogeshwari Devi, Jaima, Jaima. Actually, much of what we're going to discuss today, we were discussing with Kuleshwari and Yogeshwari and Deepa Leelama in Denver. So I want to do a few things. Obviously, let's say a few things about why this day is so special, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the three things I was hoping to do today. So today's important because on 9/11, 1893, this was the day that Swami Vivekananda would give his first address. Obviously, it is the first of many addresses that he would give. It's remarkable because back then there weren't microphones or anything like that. So he would just stand on the platform and speak to some 2,000 people in this hall, and the hall would always be overflowing such that he would have to give his speech often twice because he was such a popular speaker. Remember, he was nobody. He wasn't even signed up or registered for the Parliament of World Religions that was taking place in Chicago that year. In Indian fashion, the Maharaja of Khetri and a lot of his loyal supporters in Madras just put him on a boat and sent him to Vancouver. And from Vancouver, he made his winding way over here to Chicago. And when he got to Chicago, he was flat out broke. So he had to move to Boston and stay in the house of someone he serendipitously met on the train on the way from Vancouver into Chicago. So like all of it was a case of serendipity. There's like no reason whatsoever for Swamiji to be on that platform giving that speech on 9/11 in 1893, except that I guess God exists. You know, the fact that Swamiji somehow managed to get up on that stage and like have the chance to speak to America, to address the world at large, that's a miracle, actually. In fact, that's one of the greatest and most important miracles of this day and age. It just is so uncanny. It's so unlikely that that should have happened. When we learn the story of how Swamiji ended up on that platform, it really makes a case for God's existence because it was nothing short of serendipity, nothing short of a miracle. And of course, I tell the story all the time of how he like lost the address and he spent the night in the German quarter where no one could speak his language. He slept in the train car. He was lost. He didn't know where to go. He sat down on the street, just tired and footsore. And it just so happened that where he sat across the street from him was a house, and the door opens and a woman comes out and she recognizes the outfit that he's wearing must be Oriental. So she's like, "Are you by any chance here for the Parliament of World Religions?" And he's like, "Oh my God, yes." And she's like, "Wow, because my husband is this person and involved in this way." And so they somehow managed to get him there against all odds, you know? So it seemed like Swamiji did everything in his power, as it were, to like make this difficult for himself and for others. Once a lot of people brought up money, like they started a subscription, much like a Patreon subscription, honestly. He was giving these talks in Madras, and his followers set up this like subscription service where people would subscribe monthly, a few rupees, in order to come and listen to his talks, right? So they gathered all this money from the subscriptions, enough money to send him to Madras. Sorry, send him from India to America for the Parliament of World Religions. And you know what this guy did? Okay, there's something else that you have to know. Many Maharajas were his friends. Like many great and powerful kings and rulers in India were his friends. So they wanted to help him. They wanted to just sponsor the whole trip. They wanted to give him the money to go to America and do this whole thing and speak at the Parliament of World Religions. But he refused to take money from Maharajas. Like he just didn't want this to be something that was funded by a state or by a government or by a particular charismatic individual. He would tell people, because I'm going for the people, the funds for my adventure should come from the people. So, given that, his disciples in Madras, and the Madras group is so important. It was South Indians, I would argue, that really recognized. It was Tamilians, Madras people who really understood what Swamiji was and what he would mean to the world. So they worked really hard to start this subscription service and get this money together. And they gave him this money. And you know what he did? This guy, he like just gave it away. He just he got cold feet or something, and he wasn't sure whether or not this was Ma's mission or his mission. He's always asking himself, am I going for me or for Ma? Am I crossing the seas to speak to Americans for my own fame, name, honor, glory? Is it really what Sri Ramakrishna would have wanted me to do? And it's also interesting to note that Sri Ramakrishna appeared in a vision before him once while he was meditating for like, I think 3 days straight with no food on the Kanyakumari rock at the southernmost point of the Indian subcontinent. And he was sitting there meditating, and Sri Ramakrishna appeared like in a vision and pointed over yonder to the west, pointed to America, clearly indicating that Swamiji should come to America and give this speech and give this talk and start his work here. Even that wasn't enough to get Swami Vivekananda to consider going to America. He was always so concerned that this was not the will of God. And he wanted to make sure that if he did anything, he did only the will of God, that he was completely surrendered to God's will. And also, there are a lot of other factors here. For instance, a sannyasin is not supposed to leave the nation. Like you can't, I mean, very conservative, very orthodox sannyasins won't cross a river. What to say crossing the ocean into a strange and foreign land back in the 1890s? I mean, just imagine the thought of like sailing. You'd be out on the sea for like a year and maybe, like for months at a time. You'd be going to China, and he did visit China actually, and he visited Japan. He visited many places on his journey to America, and he loved the travel. It was such an important time in his life, and the letters that he was sending back to his brother monks demonstrated how inspired he was by coming into contact with the world. Swami Medanandaji, in his book on Vivekananda, describes Vivekananda as the first global citizen or the first cosmopolitan because he had this kind of personality where he saw the best in everyone and in every place, and he was willing to assimilate that into his own personality and into his own teaching. So wherever he went, he felt at home. And so when he was amongst Americans, they were somewhat unconscious of his Indianness, as it were. And when he went back to India, he was seamlessly, of course, India as his home, he was seamlessly integrated into the greater part of society. So he was like the kind of person who was an everyman, if you will. He was a global citizen, a cosmopolitan. So he loved traveling. But that being said, it's still scary. It's still scary to get on a boat and leave everything you've ever known behind and sail out to America to talk to Americans in your not your mother tongue about like the highest metaphysic. Like it's just a scary thing to do. And also it's an alluring thing to do because it would of course bring him a lot of notoriety. He would be famous. He would be maybe praised for doing this, and he didn't want to do it unless he knew that he was doing it for the right reasons. So because of that, he was always like dragging his feet on going to America. And so he gave away all the money. After they generated the money through subscription. He just gave it all away. And then they had to do this a few more, like twice, I think they had to do it before he finally was willing to go. The Maharaja of Khetri actually did sponsor his outfit. That's kind of an interesting episode. They took him into like a shop and decked him out in this beautiful red, like kind of smock. Swamiji would always wear these fancy turbans, and he would wear a sash. Like he would carry his turban and his sash in a suitcase, and then he would put on this turban and put on the sash. But his main outfit was a wine red, this like deep wine red, kind of jippa sort of thing. And so he was given a fine purse and dressed up and put on a boat and sent to America. Yeah, he was given a makeover actually. This dirty, dusty sadhu. And he was I mean, he was born to a royal family. He was a very princely person. But you have to remember, he renounced all of that to wander barefoot and unknown in the dusty plains of India and the jungles of South India. Like all about, he went north, east, south, west, everywhere in India. He immersed himself in India and in its people and in its currents and its traditions. And he had become India. He had lost himself to India, as it were. He was the very embodiment of India, past, present, and future. And so necessarily then he's the best representative for the cultural, spiritual, and what other else transmissions that would come from this ancient nation who was asleep to its own glory, if you will. So anyway, he comes over to America, and all manner of things happen to prevent his speaking at the Parliament of World Religions. Because when he arrives, he realizes that you had to actually register for this thing. I mean, what an Indian mistake. He just thought he could show up and start speaking. And the Maharaja of Khetri, one of his closest friends in India and most influential supporters, lifelong supporter, and the boys in Madras, they also thought that no recommendation or letter of, like no letters were important. He's Swami Vivekananda, for crying out loud. Just look at him, the way he walks, the light and fire in his eyes. As one scholar would say later, does the sun, do you ask the sun for its right to shine? It just shines. And similarly, Swami Vivekananda was such an impressive figure, such a powerful personality, that nobody thought that any formalities would ever be important in his speaking at the Parliament of World Religion. So they just sent him. And you know what? People make fun of the Indians for doing this. Like, oh my God, what an Indian thing to do. Like, forget about registration. They're late. Obviously, they're late to registration, etc., etc. But you know what? They were right. Those boys at Khetri, those dreamers and idealists, the Maharaja, no, so those boys in Madras, the Maharaja of Khetri, they were right. You didn't need to sign Swamiji up for anything. You could just put him on a boat, send him across the sea, and he would conquer the world. Because that's Swami fucking Vivekananda. That's just what he was going to do. So anyway, he got there, realized that the time for signing up was way past. There was no hope anymore of speaking at the Parliament of World Religions, and it was too expensive to stay in Chicago. He was getting swindled left, right, and center because he was, kind of naive to the ways of the world, to the hustle and bustle of the queen of the Midwest, slumbering on the shores of Lake Michigan. So he was there getting swindled, paying way too much for hotel rooms and whatnot, and he realized he just couldn't afford to stay there anymore. So he was defeated and dejected. He was really actually sad. When you look at the letters that he sent at this time, you could see that he was really dejected. He really took it to heart. Like he had failed his master's mission. He had wasted everybody's time, and all because of an oversight. What a waste. After months of travel, you get to a place and you realize the time for signing up was way past. So anyway, he met somebody on the train and made friends with her, and she had extended an invitation to him to come and stay in Boston with her. She was very impressed with him. So he thought, okay, if he takes up that invitation, he wouldn't have to pay for hotels. He would have room and board, and Boston was much cheaper anyway. So he thought, okay, whatever, let me just go to Boston. So he went over to Boston and stayed with this lady, but she had a brother who was very influential. She herself was very influential, but she had a brother also who was very much part of the literary circles of that time. So naturally, because of their connections, people started coming to hear Swami Vivekananda speak in a living room. And it's really remarkable to me that this entire revolution started in the living rooms of interested Americans, private house homeowners who just like saw something in this guy and saw something in his message and were attracted to the things that he was saying. And so they just gave him a space in their living rooms to talk about whatever he wanted to talk about. And what ended up happening was people started showing up, like from all over. They would hear about it. It was all word of mouth. And soon the living rooms would start filling up. And then he would start getting these gigs at local churches. Um, there's a very interesting thing, actually. I should read it to you. I wrote it down in a note. I had come across a letter that somebody had sent to somebody. The names aren't so important right now. We're not doing like a whole historical thing, but there's this beautiful letter. Anyway, let me just give you a timeline. I just like just if you want to geek out with me for a little bit, I'll just give you a timeline of some of the things that happened. So on May 31st in 1893, that's when he departed from India, from Bombay. He set out for America. On July 10th, he wrote a letter in Malaysia actually, because he was in Penang, he went to Singapore, he went to Hong Kong. And it's so interesting because when he went to China, he really wanted to see the Chinese Buddhist monasteries, but they told him that the Chinese Buddhists were incredibly recluse and they would not take kindly to strangers showing up. Everyone was afraid to set foot into the Chinese monastery. But Swamiji was fearless. Along with a translator, he went, and the translator refused to go into the Chinese monastery. The translator like stood at a distance, and Swamiji boldly started striding into the vicinity. And these monks, enraged, came out of the monastery with sticks in hand, coming to chase him away or something like that. But once they recognized his robes and recognized that he was a Swami from India, they were full of awe and reverence, and they fell to his feet and asked for a kabach. They kept saying, kabach, kabach, kabach. And even the translator was kind of confused about that word, but Swamiji understood it because they were saying kabach with a Chinese accent. But the word kabach is obviously the Sanskrit word kavacham, which means spell or armor or charm. It's really interesting. These Chinese Buddhists, they were in awe of the Indian Swamis, necessarily because they understand their Buddhist heritage comes from India. And so this figure of a regal monk dressed in the ochre robes of ancient India, like that inspired them. And of course, they're thinking, this man must have powers. He must be able to give me some kind of magic or something. Give me a charm. Give me a spell or something. So they're like, kabach, kabach, kabach. And he obliged, you know. He took a piece of paper. He literally wrote Om in Sanskrit on the piece of paper and folded it and handed it back to the monks. And they were so delighted. So right now, probably in some monastery, unless it's gotten lost, is a spell or a charm that Swamiji himself blessed and handed to some monks in 1893 in July. Right? Isn't that remarkable? Also, hi, Lala. Laleshwari Devi. Jaima, Jaima, Jaima. Asha Devi, so good to see you in the pink of health. Quite a nice blood offering you made. I think Mother is pleased. But see how quickly it pays off? Anyway, so he leaves Japan July 14th, and he leaves Japan in Yokohama for Vancouver. So Vancouver is actually the first place in the West that he set foot, BC, Canada. So Canadians actually have more of a claim to Swamiji's landing than anybody else. Sorry, Lala, it's on the other side though. Our side, the West side, because it's the best side. Anyway. So this Martanda Bhairava, this Bhairava of the setting sun, naturally he lands on the West Coast in Vancouver. And from Vancouver, he went through the Canadian Rockies to Winnipeg, I guess, to Minnesota, in Wisconsin. And okay, this is where he meets Kate, though. So Kate Sanborn, she's like 54 years old, and he meets her on this train, like on the way to Minnesota, to Wisconsin. So Kate Sanborn, she's the one who would later introduce him to John Henry Wright, who is a Greek history professor at Harvard. And it's John Henry Wright's recommendation that eventually got Swamiji a spot in the Parliament of World Religions. it's kind of a remarkable thing because, of course, John Henry Wright was like an incredibly influential and well-known philosopher and intellectual at the time. So he wrote a letter of recommendation. It was a glowing recommendation. He was the one who first said, "Do you have to ask the sun for its right to shine?" And he said, "Here is a man who is greater than all of our scholars put together." That was part of his recommendation. It's a glowing recommendation. Anyway, July 30th, he got to Chicago and he stayed in this first class hotel actually for 12 days. And he just visited the World's Fair. This is so cute. He's just wandering about, looking at all the exhibits and things. He ran into some Maharajas and whatnot. He ran into some countrymen actually, and some of them even recognized him. Anyway, he moved to Boston in August to stay with Kate Sanborn for reasons aforementioned. And it's interesting, actually, he then stayed with John Henry Wright in Massachusetts in this place called Annisquam. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but August 26th and August 27th, he stayed at this place in Massachusetts, and he actually gave his first public lecture on August 27th. So when we think of like Swamiji and his heritage and the way he shook this country and shook the world, we often think back to 9/11, 1893, to that speech that he gave at the Parliament of World Religions. But actually, his first speech, the first speech he ever gave, the first public lecture. I mean, of course, before this, he was lecturing in the living rooms and parlors of private homeowners. But this was his first address to the public. And this was actually on August 27th at a village church, in Annisquam. And Mrs. Wright wrote something really interesting. I have it written here. She said, "These staid New Englanders took up a collection for a heathen college in India to be run strictly on heathen principles." It's a remarkable thing. He gave this talk and then he asked for donations to set up a school for girls in India. And it's remarkable that these staid New Englanders, like these very conservative Christians, were willing to get some money together to like set up a heathen school in heathen India based on heathen principles, on Hindu ideas. That's remarkable. That's a really beautiful thing. And just recently, I was in Michigan and I was touched because after a Hindu wedding, a Vedic wedding, some people had come up to me with tears in their eyes and they said that they felt closer to God than, I mean, like they were appreciative of it. I didn't tell you this, Asha, but like I had some really moving interactions after your wedding. And it was just touching because like there's nothing like God. And for those whose hearts are open to the touch and presence of God, it comes through. And this is, I think, a huge victory that on August 27th, not a victory for Vivekananda, not a victory for India, but a victory for all of us, a victory for the world, that a few people in a church were able to hear what this man had to say. They were able to feel what India had to offer. Jewels need a jewel box. And so it's remarkable that this country was such a ready receptacle for this profound transmission that India was on the verge of forgetting. You don't even understand, Americans, what you will mean to us and what you will mean to the world. You don't understand what you're doing for everyone by being open to this message when so many forces in your society are working to close you off to it. Because India forgets. India was forgetting. And if it wasn't for America and its receptivity to Swami Vivekananda, India might have remained slumbering. Even now, she continues to slumber, but it's you guys and all of your fervor and your understanding that will rouse her from her decades-long slumber. And this is Swamiji's mission. Ultimately, his mission was a mission for India, to remind India of its own greatness. And ultimately, his mission is for the entire world, to remind everyone else of their own wisdom. Bhairavananda is also saying this. It's fashionable in India to throw away Vedic wisdom. It's true. It's true. All these lineages are falling apart. Gurukulas are fading. Children no longer want to learn from their fathers or mothers and from their grandparents. Like all these ancient Gurukulas, which for centuries have been maintaining this knowledge, this pristine knowledge from the dawn of human civilization, they're all fading out like so many stars imploding, leaving behind only the vacuum of the night sky. And so gurukulas like this are really important, really, 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 really important. And of course, you can never, you could burn all the books, you could destroy all the nations. This wisdom would remain. But it's just wonderful that it's being maintained in this way. And it's because if everything burnt down, we'd have to like maybe reinvent the wheel. But we don't have to do that. All these structures are already available, already present. And somehow, despite all odds, despite 700 years of Mughal invasion, despite the colonized effort of like missionaries to like scrub every ounce of our culture from our psyches, despite all odds, somehow this ascetic, barefoot and dusty, found his way onto this platform to give this speech. It's remarkable. So on August 27th, he spoke at a church. That was like the first time that he spoke in public. I think that's important. So it's Annisquam. Massachusetts, I think, that will have its first claim to Vivekananda and his public presence. And then August 28th to September 4th, he stayed in Salem, Massachusetts, which is interesting. And he stayed with the Mrs. Kate Tannett Woods. And then again, he lectured publicly on August 28th at the Thought and Work Club at Wesley Church. And again on Sunday, September 3rd, in the evening at the East Church. So it's interesting that he was giving these talks at churches. Of course, the Unitarian Church would be very important for Swamiji's mission, especially the later part of his mission. He would give these like huge talks, like thousands of people would attend. Tens of thousands in some cases, actually. The churches would be overflowing, but they were mainly like Universalist, Unitarian kind of churches, and also a lot of like New Age spaces. So like the Home of Harmony or things like that. There were many New Age spaces in San Francisco and in other places where he would give talks also. So living rooms of private homeowners, societies, New Agey kind of Christian thought sort of societies, and of course churches. And these aren't, I think these aren't Unitarian churches. They're just like the local community centers. And it was beautiful and inspiring that they opened their halls to him and gave him a place to speak. So anyway, he spoke at the East Church, and then he gave satsang in Mrs. Wood's garden later that evening. So I'm just thinking of that, how that day must have been. You know, Sunday morning, everybody goes to the church and they hear this curio dressed in his turban and sash giving a talk about India, a faraway nation, which had been maligned by all the missionaries for so long. People thought that in India, mothers throw their children to the crocodiles, and these are all heathens who live in trees, etc., etc. And now here is said heathen who somehow escaped the jaws of the crocodile, speaking to them about this strange and mysterious land. Many people probably went just because it was something to do. In a small town, a small sleepy town, here's this guy in a turban, let's just go see what he's all about. They probably weren't really interested in what he had to say, they just wanted to see him. But then many of them, upon hearing him, were filled with an unspeakable fervor. They recognized truth immediately when they heard it. So I'm just imagining that day where everybody went to the church and they heard his talk. And of course, most of the people there were the public, but many of the people there were his friends. So I can imagine him showing up with his posse, with all the people who he was staying with, and then greeting the general public. And then afterwards, in the evening, they all had a satsang in the garden. I can only imagine how beautiful that must have been. Revisiting some of the themes he must have brought up in the morning's lecture, talking about this, talking about that, just freely associating for hours on end as the sun was setting in somebody's garden. Remarkable. Basically, I want to say never underestimate the power of a living room, or the power of a garden, or the power of a small group of enthusiasts. It could change the whole world, actually. 38 people in a Zoom room. It could change the whole world. And it did. I mean, look at this. Anyway, so then, it's just a really sentimental day for me, so please forgive me. Anyway, September 4th, Saratoga, New York. This is interesting. And this place is actually interesting for various other political reasons. But in Saratoga, New York, he spoke 3 times before the convention of the American Social Science Association. So this is Mr. Franklin Sanborn, who was the secretary of this association, and he's the brother, a very literary and very well-connected brother of Kate Sanborn. It's kind of crazy how like timely this connection was. He met someone on a frigging train. And like that would be one of the most important encounters because she was a writer, she was an intellectual, she was influential, her brother was influential, and many of these gigs came about because of their support. So he spoke there 3 times, and then he spoke twice at a private house in Saratoga, New York, and he gave 3 talks at a convention. And we have the titles actually, interestingly enough. One of them was called The Mohammedan Rule in India, and the other one was called The Use of Silver in India, which is a really interesting lecture topic. And this is because at that time the silver standard was trending. And the third lecture, we don't know what it was, but he gave 3 talks, and that's when he met, and then finally he met the Hale family in Providence, etc., etc. Okay, anyway, September 11th, this is important. On Monday at 10 a.m., the parliament begins, and the Swamiji was the 31st to give a late afternoon address. But it's interesting because, like, I was just saying, it was so difficult for him to get on that stage. He was just moment after moment thwarted. At every turn, he just like lost the address, like he just didn't know how to get to the place, to the actual literal building where he was supposed to give his talk. But on Monday, I think it was important that it was a Monday, Lord Shiva's day also. It was 10 a.m. and he got there and they put him on like, and there's a picture actually, a beautiful photo of him sitting with a bunch of other influential delegates like off to the side of the stage. And he was so nervous. This is important to me because we in our mind think that he's this really like bold, self-assured, confident speaker, but he was terrified. And every time it was his turn to speak, he was like, no, 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 it's okay. I'll go after the next guy. And like that, they kept pushing him back and kept pushing him back and kept pushing him back until like 30 speakers went by. And he was the 31st person to get up and speak. So he got up, he prayed to Saraswati, And he got up and he gave his speech. And as you know, literally the rest is history. But he opened with brothers and sisters of America. He was the only one not to have prepared a speech. And that was really interesting. Everyone else had spent actually years, if not months, at least months, preparing a speech. And maybe many of them were reading speeches that were prepared for them by their respective societies. Almost everyone was there representing their religion or their society. There was Mazumdar representing the Brahmo Samaj. There were like Zen monks from Japan. Everyone was there for their own thing, right? And then Swamiji gets up on the stage and he has like no prepared speech. And very quickly people realize that he's not really representing anything. He's literally representing everything. He's representing India, of course, but he's representing India's sentiment of universal tolerance. Religion, capital R. What a remarkable thing. He just wants to represent everybody and affirm and support everyone. And that really captured the audience. So when he opened with brothers and sisters, sorry, sisters and brothers of America, and that's also as a Shakta kind of telling, he opens with sisters and brothers of America. Before he could like say anything else, the whole audience gets up, as you know, and starts applauding him for like 2 whole minutes, which is weird. I mean, just think about how weird that is. Who does that? He's like a random guy. They've already heard 30 speeches and they were unimpressed. And he didn't even say anything. He just said Sisters and Brothers of America. But the bhava, the charisma, the power of that personality was so immediately felt. It was so electrifying that people literally got up to their feet and just cheered him for no reason. And they would later learn the reason because he was ready to give the message of this day and age that all religions are equally true, that God exists, and the purpose of life is to realize that God directly and immediately. And hopefully today you'll see, I think that message is going to deepen, I'm going to say, into the veneration of God as mother, which is, I think, the real core theology of Sri Ramakrishna. It's a Tantric theology. It's a non-dual theology, but it's a theology based in the Divine Mother and the presence of God as Mother. So saluting the Divine Mother Saraswati, this child of the Divine Mother, full of Shakti, spoke to the audience, and my God, you can imagine how Kali must have pervaded the room. It's like just the relief of everyone to, like, this is Kali. And right now, when we're worshiping Mother Kali in the image in our houses, none of that would have been possible if that speech wasn't given. And I think everybody knew that. All of your ancestors here in America, all those people in the Midwest who attended that lecture, they knew what it would mean to you probably. They weren't even sure what it would mean to them, but they intuited it and they cheered him with gusto. I think that's worth noting. So that happened, but like that's not the only thing. He gave many addresses and his talks were so well attended that he would have to give them twice. Once again in the overflow room also, because there was just not enough seats for everyone. And there were no microphones. So just imagine he's just there giving a talk, projecting his voice to 2,000 of the greatest intellectuals of this country again and again and again in overflow rooms and whatnot. So he spoke at various receptions. So after the events, he would like go to parties and stuff. And I think that's important. He would go to people's houses for parties. And then he would give talks. Like once he gave a talk on the condition of women in his country on September 14th at a particular Miss Potter Palmer's party, at a house party. He gave this talk. September 15th, he gave the talk Why We Disagree. September 18th, he read his paper on Hinduism, which is phenomenal, unbelievable. On September 20th, he gave the talk Religion is Not the Crying Need of India. September 22nd, he gave Orthodox Hinduism and the Vedanta philosophy, as well as the modern religions of India. These two talks, by the way, were not in the main hall. They were given in Hall 3 before the scientific section chaired by a particular Merwin Mary Snell. Anyway, all of this is weirdly academic and scholarly and historical, and I don't mean to get into it too much, except that I want to point to this. He's giving many talks on women. You'll notice a lot of these talks, the condition of women in his country, or women in Oriental religion, which was another talk he gave in Hall 7, again, organized by Miss Potter Palmer. He also did Q&As, which I think is interesting. So on September 23rd, he gave a Q&A. He did 4 other addresses. And on September 24th, he spoke at the Third Unitarian Church in Chicago, on the love of God. That's interesting. A lot of these places are still there. You could probably still visit the Third Unitarian Church. I don't know. Maybe it is. It could possibly it's not there anymore. But then he gave one more talk on Tuesday, September 26th, and that was on Buddhism. And this is so interesting. Look what he calls Buddhism, the fulfillment of Hinduism. It's remarkable. We know that Swamiji had great reverence for the Buddha. In fact, one of his early meditative experiences was of the Buddha. Like he saw the Buddha and then he actually freaked out and got up and ran away. He was a child, you know. He was meditating as a child and the Buddha appeared before him, a bald, ochre-robed, saffron-robed monk with a begging bowl. and was walking towards him, and then he got up and ran away. And you'll see so much of what Swamiji says resonates with the Buddha's idea of Mahakaruna. So Swamiji and the Buddha are very linked. Buddha and Shiva are very linked. So the energy of Shiva, Buddha, Swamiji, all of that is just like the same energy pouring through. I was recently in Varanasi in the beginning of this year, and some of you attended that lecture. I was in a fervor, like I was in Sarnath. I was giving a talk in Sarnath where Buddha gave his first talk. And Sarnath is just up the road from Varanasi. So there I was in my favorite city, Shiva's holy city, in Sarnath, where Buddha gave his first lecture. And I wanted to talk about Swami Vivekananda. I think that lecture was called Buddha, Shiva, and Vivekananda or something like that. So the final lecture he gave, second to last lecture he gave, was about Buddhism as the fulfillment of Hinduism. It's remarkable. Just notice all that like tension between Buddhists and Hindus. Like he's just blowing all that out of the water, and he's just giving the essential teaching of the Indic civilization, which you cannot really call Vedantic or Upanishadic or Tantric or Buddhist or Hindu. None of those terms could ever really pigeonhole the depth, breadth, and power of this message that comes from Swami Vivekananda. So that was an interesting talk. Buddhism, the fulfillment of Hinduism. And then he gave another talk, the last one, September 27th, which was the address at the final session. So how beautiful. And of course, like the crowd went wild. After he gave these series of talks, many of them were later published. The full talks were published in newspapers. His posters were posted all over Chicago. It's remarkable. Like the city really went wild. I think we forget how popular he was at that time. Huge newspapers, like in the Rutherford American, Press of America, Interior Chicago, Chicago Tribune. In the Review of Reviews, he was called Noble and Sublime. In the New York Critic, he was called an orator by divine right. Even the New York Herald called him the greatest figure at the Parliament of World Religions. And interestingly, in this article, they said, after hearing him, we feel how foolish it is to send missionaries to this learned nation. It's remarkable. But interestingly, it wasn't until November 11th or December 12th that India would hear about his success. Because the Indian Mirror, which is a popular newspaper in India, they only published in November 11th about Swami Vivekananda. So it's really interesting, actually, that India was asleep to his success for some time. And then when reports got back to India about this anonymous Swami giving this talk and conquering the Western world, even his brother disciples didn't know that it was Naren, because he had changed his name so many times in the course of his wanderings. He wasn't Vivekananda to them when they last met, I don't think. He went by so many names, Satchit Ananda, Vividishananda Ji, like there were so many different names. He was just Naren to them. And so when reports of a particular Swami Vivekananda came to India, even Swami Vivekananda's own brother disciples, they had a sense that it must have been him, but they were shocked to find out, like, oh my God, this Vivekananda is our Naren. And you can imagine their joy. But one thing you should also know is that things were about to get really difficult for him, because after he gave this slew of talks, of course, he was so popular, so beloved, that naturally he was going to attract the ire of many, many people. And most notably, the Mazumdar of the Brahmo Samaj, who was so upset with how popular and how well received he was. So the year 1894, just shortly following his success at the Parliament of World Religions, would be tragic for him. This is the time when Swamiji is reading newspapers and the smear campaigns against him, and he would like literally sit in the chair and weep. It's remarkable just to think about the human portrait that is painted of this great figure, of this great hero, that we find in his letters and in the reminiscences of those who were close to him. It's remarkable to think of such a spiritual giant in such human terms. He truly was a Bhairava, comfortable and able to experience all emotions and express them and immediately alchemize them and transform that poison into nectar. So we're all here because that speech happened, and today is the day when we commemorate that. 1893, Parliament of World Religions, 9/11, Swamiji came and shook the whole world. So, Jai Swamiji. I was thinking of doing a few things. I was thinking maybe generally, usually every year, what we'll do is we'll read a little bit from some of the recorded lectures. I was thinking maybe we could read that Parliament address, the first one, which was really beautiful. We tend to do that. Sometimes also I like to read Sister Nivedita's forward to the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, because oh my God, she just hits the nail right on the head. It's so beautiful and so poetic. And maybe we'll do all of that later. But just earlier today, I was looking at the picture of Swami Vivekananda, contemplating him, meditating on him. And I realized, like, you guys, like, we're just rehashing so much sometimes as a movement, as those who have inherited the legacy of Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda. I find that sometimes we're really stuck in the past. A lot of times we're trying to like recreate everything so that it's just like 1890s Boston or some shit. Like you'll go to some places that are associated with Swami Vivekananda, and you might get really frustrated because the whole thing feels like a stodgy museum where everyone is trying to preserve everything and like, oh, this is where this guy sat one time, and this is the pipe that Swamiji smoked, and like we're like obsessed with Swamiji sometimes that we forget about his message and we forget to do the work that he left for us to do. It's kind of like with the Christ. He said, "These and even greater works shall you do, for I am going back to my Father." Except nobody wants to fucking do the work because everyone wants to just like hero worship the Christ. So much so that we forget to become the Christ. The only thing the Christ ever wanted of us is that we become Christ-like. And instead, look what we've done. We've made an idol out of him and outsourced the responsibility to him. And now no one is willing to actually step up to the ideal because we're too busy idolizing it. So Swamiji came to shatter all our idols, to break our false idols. And the last idol I mean to break is this effigy of Swamiji. So let's destroy the image of the man. He would be very happy. Once he said also, if you ever worship me, I'll come back from the dead as a ghost and strangle you. Because he didn't want us to like spend all of our time in a shrine room waving incense and clapping our hands and saying, Om Swamiji, Om Swamiji, Om Swamiji. He wanted us to become Swamiji. He wanted us to live up to his legacy, not to merely parrot it or reminisce about it. And so it's very sad because a lot of those who have inherited his legacy and his power, what if we become but a book club, sitting around in some dusty room trying to keep everything intact the way it was in 1890s, reading the words that Swamiji spoke in front of a different audience at a different time? Fuck that. This is a different time. This is a different audience. The words must be new. The message is the same, but the messaging must evolve. Many things he would say now that he maybe would not have been able to say then. He might have been able to speak more candidly about Kali now than he ever would have been able to speak candidly about her then. So let's talk about the things that maybe he couldn't talk about, like Kali, like Tantra, like the various aspects of his teaching that maybe have a cultural and spiritual foundation that are maybe forgotten about, that is forgotten, like the Kaula, the Vamachara, like all these various techniques and practices that provide a really good foundation actually for Swamiji's God as the world idea or serving God as man idea. That profound teaching that the best puja you could do is to feed the hungry or to clothe the naked or to give medicine to the sick or to like give your life and breath for the service of humanity, which was ultimately Buddha's message. Like that teaching is rooted in a metaphysic, I think, that is now high time we explored. Not necessarily an Advaita Vedanta metaphysic, but probably, as many of you are discovering, a Tantric metaphysic, if I may say so myself, at risk of being sectarian or at risk of trying to pigeonhole Swami or claim him for my own tradition. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying that there are things that Swamiji maybe would only talk about in private that for maybe the first time in history now we have a chance to talk about in public in a bigger, more accessible setting. Like, for instance, Kali. Kali was something that was very, very important to Swamiji, but it was not something he felt comfortable speaking about openly. He said, Kali worship is my special fad. I don't teach it because it's special to me, and I only want to teach what is universal. So I've only ever taught the Upanishads. But he would say in private conversations that he was a through and through Kali worshipper. He would give hints as to his relationship with Ma Kali. He would express that Sri Ramakrishna was nothing but Kali. He said, I'm sure of it. This Kali has dredged up this body called Ramakrishna for her own purposes. He would admit to being forced to work as a slave for Mother Kali. It's really Kali who is behind the stage the whole time pulling the strings. But now she's making her appearance way more known. And I think Swamiji would have liked that. When I was in Bellarmont, one of my favorite places to meditate is just outside of Swamiji's room. In the old Bellarmont, of course, but also in the new Bellarmont. There's a temple to Swamiji, and just outside the temple is a bell tree under which the Swami himself used to meditate. So that's one of my favorite places on the campus. But I like that temple a lot because when you go in, you're expecting to see a murti of Swami Vivekananda. And you know, that makes sense because every other temple on the campus features a white marble murti of the deity in question. So for example, if you go to the Holy Mother temple, there's a beautiful Holy Mother there. And most people go to the Holy Mother temple because she very quickly answers prayers. So it tends to be the busiest of the various temples. Of course, in the Ramakrishna temple, the main temple, which is actually designed like a mosque, believe it or not, and there is actually also a mosque just outside Bellarmont. Just as you're about to enter Bellarmont, to your left is a beautiful mosque. And I remember just recently when I was walking in, the first day I got there, they were doing a Muslim funeral. And it was just like to the left as you walk. It was beautiful. Anyway, the main hall for Sri Ramakrishna, gorgeous place, spacious, designed kind of like a mosque. In that hall is Sri Ramakrishna, larger than life Sri Ramakrishna, and made of pure marble and just unbelievably beautiful and unbelievably detailed. Of course, there's a Swami Brahmananda temple too, Raja Maharaj, and he too is a commanding presence. There's a marble statue of Swami Brahmananda. And it's very beautiful. Like in the mornings at 4 a.m., they open the temple for Mangal Arati. And as you're walking to the temple, you can see the mini Aratis being performed in all the other temples. Raja Maharaj and Holy Mother and Swamiji are all off to the side over here, and Sri Ramakrishna is right in front of you. And you can see all the lights being lit, and everyone is a marble murti. The lights are being waved before a figure, and honestly, like in the wee hours of the morning, when you're shambling and stumbling over to the temple for Mangal Arati, and it's like that liminal space in between waking and in between dreaming, it really looks like all those murtis come to life. The marble looks like it blinks. You know, they're very lifelike and chiseled perfectly and whatnot. So anyway, and I'll tell you a funny story. When my Gurudeva once he went on a school field trip to Belrumat and they were showing him around. And then at the end of the day, he asked, "So who is that statue that we saw upstairs? I saw Raja Maharaj, I saw Holy Mother, I saw Sri Ramakrishna, but who is that statue upstairs in Guru Maharaj's room, in the President Maharaj's room?" And they were like, "Bro, that's the President Maharaj." Our Paramaguru, Swami Shankarananda, was so pale that when he sat for meditation, he became so still that he became like one of those statues. And my Gurudeva actually thought he was a statue when he first saw him. Is that remarkable? And so he was asking his teachers and his friends, like, who is that other guy? Who is that other statue? And it's like no statue at all. It was Swami Shankarananda, a living, breathing human who had entered into samadhi and who was glowing with the radiance of a marble statue. Anyway, so there are all these statues. But when you go into Swamiji's temple, and this is remarkable, it's the furthest from Sri Ramakrishna. Like Sri Ramakrishna is there, Holy Mother is there, Raja Maharaj is there, and then there's Swamiji off to one corner, just by the Smashan. There's a place where a lot of the direct disciples were also cremated. So the Smashan is there, the Ganga is there, Swamiji's temple is there. And when you walk in, you're expecting to find a marble Swami Vivekananda. Nothing of the sort. It's just an Om. And even that feels superfluous. Truly, he is para tattve sadalino. He is truly merged in the absolute, that formless beyond all representation. And you really feel that at that temple. When you step into Swamiji's temple, there's a clarity, a spaciousness, a silence, a depth, an unbelievable void presence. It's really thrilling, Swamiji's temple. So much for that. I don't know why we're talking about the various temples in Belrumat. Oh, yes, I remember. And it's because we want to focus on the power, on the transmission, and not ossify it into these fossilized, calcified images. Down with all idols. Break down all the statues so that this energy may flow. Ultimately, that was Swamiji's message. And he's Shiva, so he has come to destroy, as it were. He's come to tear down institutions, to help stuck energy flow. Part of why we go to smashans is because as Shaivas, as the worshippers of Shiva, we perform a function in this universe, The worshippers of Vishnu, they perform their own function. And arguably, if there are worshippers of Brahma, then they perform their function. And everything is holy and everything is legit and everything is valid. But those who are vibrating on this plane, who are resonating with a Shaiva sort of frequency, they tend to go to smashans. They tend to enjoy dead and decaying things, liminal things, because that's our role in the universe. Our role is to help stuck energy flow. And a big part of that is transgression. A big part of that is antinomian behavior meant to confound and obfuscate those ossified structures, which we call institutions and religions. So that being said, like we are in the smashan doing work, as it were, to help these stuck energies flow. And with Swamiji, that's exactly what's happening. He's coming to the smashan of this world and he's allowing all of us spirits trapped in this limbo to attain higher births or to attain higher worlds. And it's a destroying, destructive, Tandava sort of Leela. There's a song, Murta Maheshwara, and in that song, one of his first, most devoted disciples, arguably, compares him to Shiva, dancing the Tandava, and who in his Tandava dance around the world is destroying all duality. So he's a fierce presence. Swamiji is a fierce presence, and today that fierce grace is flowing. So I just wanted to say a few words about that. Now, I don't want to just rehash his words, though. I was thinking of maybe like reading speeches to you. Let's just fanboy out a little bit. Let's geek out about Swamiji. Let's talk about how it was for him to be here. And let's think about him. Let's meditate on him. Let's read his speeches. And then I was looking at a picture of him today and I'm like, oh my God, that would be terrible. That'd be awful. What? This is a different audience. Let's say new words. Let's meditate on Swami Vivekananda and let's pray that he speaks through us and illumines our mind and guides our intellect so that we may say new words. Same message, different messaging. Maybe there are things that he would have liked to say that he didn't get to say that we together can create the space for, etc. So anyway, I want to do three things. The first thing I want to do is I want to review some puja stuff. There's some foundational puja things that I want to go over. Last week, we had discussed food offerings. And it was something that Yogeshwari Ma actually brought up with me on the first day in Denver. She was like, how do I offer this food at the altar? Because I realized, oh my God, that's the most primordial instinct in all ritual traditions. Whenever there is an altar and whenever there is any kind of veneration whatsoever, whether that's ancestor worship or deity worship, whatever the case may be, the first instinct that we have as venerators, as worshippers, as altar keepers is to like offer food, offer nourishment, offer sustenance. And of course, the forms around offering food will differ from tradition to tradition. For instance, in some traditions, we don't eat the food that's already been offered to the ancestors. We give it to the animals or we put it in a fire. In other traditions, by eating the food, it is offered to the ancestors. And in some traditions, having offered the food, now they can be consumed as consumables, as sacrament, as prasad. So while these traditions might differ from culture to culture, more or less, everyone loves to offer food to God. It's one of the main things that we do at the altar. So Yogeshwari Ma brought this up, and I was like, oh, well, if there's anything that we can drill together, if there's anything we can really solidify and clarify when it comes to doing a tantric puja practice, perhaps it's this, offering food. Because there are specific mantras that we can do, specific mudras, and specific bhavas, specific feelings and emotions that we can evoke, specific ideas that we can reference and contemplate as we make the food offering. So the food offering is actually incredibly sophisticated. There are many, many, many sophisticated mantras. By the way, Swamiji was notoriously against ritualism for ritualism's sake. Because he felt India was full of people doing empty rituals. So much so that outside the temple in Rameshwaram, he told people that while it was all well and good to worship God in the image, as indeed his master Sri Ramakrishna did to the end of his days, it was better to worship God in the Taj Mahal of all temples, in the human body. So many people think Swamiji didn't like puja, that he was somehow against rituals, and that if he had his way, we wouldn't be doing rituals at all. In fact, he once jokingly said to his brother disciple Sashi Maharaj, the only thing he was ever afraid of was Sashi's bells. Because whenever you heard the bell ringing, it would mean a long ritual was underway. And he once said to Sashi Maharaj, in jest, that if ever I get a chance, I will throw all your puja things into the river. He got into these moods sometimes where he felt so constrained by ritual and by all like ritual obligations and forms and structures. He was always like desperate to break out of forms and break out of structures. Like they couldn't hold him. The rules and regimes of puja couldn't hold him. Yeah, I know. I would also be sad if someone threw all my puja things in the river. And so would Swamiji. I think he would have regretted it immediately and he would probably have come crying back to Sashi Maharaj, given him a big hug and apologized for it. He was known for antics like this. He would do something and then later really regret it and then apologize to the brother disciple who was a victim of said antics. For example, once Swamiji forbade naps. He just didn't feel like we, as the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, had the time to sleep. We have work to do. I sometimes think of that Lord of the Rings scene in the extended version of the third episode in Return of the King, where there's like an orc, and Frodo and Sam are like marching with all the orcs, and they are like just sitting by the side, like they get whipped, and the orc is like, "Move it, you slugs! Don't you know we're at war?" And that really hit me. It's like that's Swamiji's war cry. It's like, what the fuck? You're napping, you're sleeping, you're taking a day off. Don't you know we're at war? And what is the war? It's a war for women. It's a war for the mother goddess. It's a war for the universality of all religions. It's a war against bigotry. It's a war against smallness of every shape and form. Don't you know we're at war? And here you are, sleeping? What about that woman in India right now who's about to endure an FGM? You will sit here and sleep as she's about to be dragged into a room and mutilated? What about the woman who has no education right now in Rajasthan? You will sleep? You can actually go to sleep tonight, knowing that she has no education whatsoever and no chance to like escape the life that she's in? How can we sleep at a time like this? That is Swamiji's bhava. And so he forbade naps. There is work to be done. In the East, in India, it's famine relief, flood relief, it's education. And for a lot of cases, it's secular education, it's skills training to equip people with the means for like participating in the economy. In India, it's about giving people a better life, the kind of life that Americans can enjoy. It's about clean running water. And being able to like supply clean running water to a village is more religion than anything is religion in this world. And that's the problem with empty rituals. Like when we wave our incense and we wave our lamps, we forget that the one that we are worshiping in the image has no running water in Rajasthan. And so that's why Swamiji at times would not be able to tolerate rituals. Like whenever he would hear the bell ringing, he would think, why are you wasting your time? Just down the street, there's someone you could help, but instead you're sitting here waving incense. What an affront to humanity. Anyway, so Swamiji forbade naps at Bellarmont because don't you know we're at war? So all day long, all night long, they're working hard. And part of that work actually is to generate spiritual power. Because that's important. You can't just do humanitarian effort. You can't just like this is the thing that happens to many people. They want to do humanitarian work, but they have no power, they have no shakti. So the whole thing degenerates into like politics and charity balls and organizations and bureaucracy. They can't help anybody. They can't even help themselves. And they call themselves social workers, humanitarians. Fie upon all of that. That's not what we're talking about. You have to generate a lot of spiritual power. So part of the work is intense austerity. Like Purasharanas up the wazoo, like homas, pujas, like a lot of meditation, and also a lot of study. Like the study regimen was unbelievable. There was like a 3-hour Sanskrit grammar lesson that Swamiji himself would give in Bellarmont. He himself would teach Sanskrit grammar. And you would think there's so much to do, and how important was it to teach Sanskrit grammar? Pretty fucking important if Swami Vivekananda himself felt the need to give those classes. So Sanskrit grammar is key. That's why what Bhairava Anandaji is doing, here in this community, you don't understand how important it is because like the Sanskrit, like, fucking learn it. You have to learn it. Swamiji insisted upon learning Sanskrit and learning Sanskrit grammar. Like it's so important. And why it's important, also maybe we'll learn about that more in the fullness of time, perhaps. So Swamiji would give his 3-hour Sanskrit grammar lesson some days. They would have satsangs. Of course, they would talk about metaphysical topics. He also insisted on studying history and philosophy, Western philosophy even. So they had a very full intellectual regimen. They were reading a lot of books, having a lot of discussions, studying a lot of things. They had a very full spiritual regimen. They were doing a lot of austerities, meditating for hours. Every morning you would have to show up at 4 a.m. and meditate until 6:30 or 7 a.m. And again, you would meditate in the evening. There were the aartis that people were performing, the daily worship that Swami Premananda for a long time was doing. He would also worship the Ganga. There's a beautiful reminiscence that I heard from one Swami. Swami Premananda, after the morning meditation, would go and perform Sri Ramakrishna's puja with gusto. And the best time to see him, they said, was when he was walking down the stairs with the puja tray in his hand. Because at that point, he was going to go to the Ganga puja. Having worshipped Sri Ramakrishna, he was going to go worship the Ganga. And he had this tray of flowers and various other ritual things in his hands. And as he was walking down the stairs, they said that he was positively glowing with the bliss and joy of worship. Anyway, so Swami Premananda, who was the manager of the grounds at that time, he would perform the worship. Of course, Sashi Maharaj at that time had gone to South India to start the work in Madras. But like they're working 24/7 round the clock, studying, doing spiritual practices, maintaining the shrines and the rituals at the temple, talking to people, counseling people, giving spiritual advice. But above all, doing humanitarian works, karma yoga, which was the central thrust of Swamiji's message. So like when there was a famine, they were the first there on the scene to help everyone out in the famine. And it didn't matter like whether you were in the midst of doing some intense austerity, the god that you're worshiping is currently starving, go and feed them. So they were doing all of this, so much so that where's the time to sleep? They barely got 5 hours, if that even. They would survive on like 3 hours of sleep and all Shakti, all vigor, all power. So their meditation was giving them that juice. But not only that, the power of Swamiji's message. There was so much Shakti flowing. It's unbelievable. They couldn't sleep, even if they wanted to. But anyway, some people like to take a nap. If you slept 3 or 5 hours last night, you probably in the middle of the day will start waning a little bit, especially after lunch. Maybe you would like a nap. Swamiji detested this. He forbade a nap, which is very against the Indian cultural ethos because we very much are attached to our siestas. So what happened was Swami Premananda was one day taking a nap. This is Swami Vivekananda's brother disciple, Premananda, okay? He's the manager of the Bellarmont campus, a very beloved and respected Swami. And you know what Swami Vivekananda did? He commanded one of his disciples, or one of the boys, one of the brahmacharis, to go to Swami Premananda's room, grab him by the ankles, and yank him from the bed because he was napping. Swamiji felt like that was just unacceptable. And that's because he had pulled an all-nighter many nights in a row to do the work. Let him like at least have some 20 minutes or something. But Swamiji felt like that was just reprehensible. Don't you know we're at war? So he had this done. And of course, can you imagine being this brahmachari? Like you're between a rock and a hard place. Like Swamiji, the boss, the big boss, is telling you to go to your actual boss, grab him by the ankles, and drag him from the bed. You're like, don't shoot the messenger, seriously. So anyway, this guy goes and he pulls Premananda. And Premananda is, of course, so upset about this. So he storms into Swamiji's room. And guess what? Only to find Swamiji crying on the balcony. And Swamiji's like, I'm so sorry I did that. I don't know what I was thinking. You are Sri Ramakrishna's most beloved disciple. He saw Radha in you. He loved you so much. And here I am pulling your legs out of bed or something. Like, how could I have ordered that? And so they both cried and hugged it out. It's a remarkable thing. There's only one person who never cried around Swamiji, and that's Saradananda. So much so that Swamiji said he had the blood of a fish. He was so cold-blooded that he was the only one who was able to withstand Swamiji's scolding. Because like Shiva, Swamiji could really go into a rage. And he was almost always angry at Bellarmine because there's work and everyone just seems so incompetent. They just couldn't keep up with him. They wanted to nap. They wanted to go to sleep. They wanted to have this meal. They wanted to like dawdle, and he had to do his master's work. So he's trying to get people on board, get them to do the work with the level of ferocity and fervor that he was demonstrating. But who could keep up with Swami Vivekananda, you know? This guy would give 6 or 7, 3 or 4 hour lectures a week without a microphone to a room full of people. He was full of Shakti. And you can't really like blame the others for not being on that level of Shakti, except that he did. He just couldn't tolerate it. He just couldn't tolerate that everyone was so incompetent and so lazy compared to him. So he would scold them and scold them and scold them, like how fiercely he would scold them. He would like scold them so severely that some of them contemplated suicide. You know, in one episode, Swami Premananda disappeared. This is an interesting episode, you know, like Swami Premananda does the arati. One day, one evening, no one showed up for the arati. And Swami Premananda was like, what's this? Sri Ramakrishna is about to receive his evening arati and the temple is empty. So Swami Premananda went around the grounds to figure out where everyone was. Lo and behold, Swamiji is giving satsang. And the thing about Swamiji is once he starts talking, it's very hard to get him to stop. He'll go for 3 hours, 4 hours, he'll just forget all about time. He's also really often late to things. So if he shows up to something, he might show up 1 hour late. But then he might talk for the next 3 hours. You never knew what would happen. So he was giving this satsang and everyone was absorbed. And Premananda showed up and was like, brother, what are you doing? It's time for the arati. And Swamiji lit into him. Swamiji was furious. He was like, what? You don't think this is the worship of God? What I'm doing here? I'm talking to God, giving lectures to God. You think the power of the master, this is the words that he used, said, should it be locked in a shrine room? You know, he felt like ritualism would trap Sri Ramakrishna's message and turn it into religion. This is not religion. This is just pure Shakti. And it should influence every dimension and realm of our life. This is an avatara that we're talking about here. Not a religious teacher, not a guru. This is not a guru. This is an avatara whose presence in this world means something for everything, whether that's art or science or women's emancipation or whatever. There's nothing in this world that is not blessed by the presence of an avatar. So Swami Vivekananda was so scared that the power of the avatara would be confined to a shrine room. And he said, you know, you guys, the way you're going about it, you're turning it into a Thakur Bari. He said, Thakur Bari means temple of Thakur. Nothing could be more detestable to Swami Vivekananda than a temple to Sri Ramakrishna. People would come and pray, oh, Sri Ramakrishna, please give me money. Please help my child get a job at an engineering firm. Please help my child get accepted into IIT. That's what the avatara came for? Petty prayers like this? Anyway, so Swamiji was so afraid of that fate. So he lit into Swami Premananda and he was like, what the fuck, bro? Like, you know, this is puja. And Swami Premananda was so hurt by that scolding that he just vanished. And because Rakal, Swami Brahmananda, and others had expressed suicidal ideation before after being scolded by Swami Vivekananda, everyone genuinely thought that Swami Premananda had drowned himself in the river. Because also Swami Premananda was of a more like sentimental nature, you could say. He was maybe more given to Indian melodrama than the rest. So if anybody was going to go drown themselves after a Swamiji scolding, it was probably Swami Premananda. You know, like he's the most likely candidate for such a thing. So this is crazy. They couldn't find him anywhere. Like nobody knew what became of him. And they started to panic. Like everyone else started to panic. And Swamiji most of all, because he's directly responsible for this. It was Swamiji's scolding that sent Premananda to perhaps a watery grave. So it's really funny. I mean, it's not funny. It's sad and tragic and beautiful. Swami Vivekananda went to the temple and allegedly, as per Swami Ashokananda's reminiscence, there's a book on Swami Premananda by Swami Ashokananda where some of these reminiscences appear. But according to Swami Ashokananda, what happened was Swamiji grabbed the railings. Remember, he didn't want to go to the temple because he was giving a talk. Now he went to the temple and he held the railings, the kind of grill. And allegedly, Swamiji was bashing his head on the railing with such force because he was in full remorse that he started to bleed. He literally started to cut his head open by banging it on the railing because he was so sad. He was full of grief, you know, because his brother disciple killed himself probably because of his scolding. Anyway, later they found Premananda. And, you know, they found him on the roof. He had climbed up to the roof, and I can only imagine him sitting there with his like knees hugging into his chest, dejected and sad. He was just pouting on the roof, you know. But just like think about these are people who regularly go into samadhi, who are there with Sri Ramakrishna. These are like the saints and spiritual giants of India. And sometimes they get depressed. Sometimes they think about killing themselves. Sometimes they don't like it when they're scolded. And sometimes they get angry and want to scold you. You know, like these are human beings. And I think the fullness of these people is something that we tend to forget when we make them into marble statues. Marble statues don't blink. And then we are cheated out of our saints because in their place we have placed idols, you know, down with them. Let's see them as humans. And more importantly, let's remember that we are exactly like them and on the same path as them. And we're destined for the same greatness. Having said that, though, there was one time, this is really beautiful reminiscence. Swamiji was giving a talk. And if nothing else, the TLDR of all of this, Swamiji's main message, arguably, which you can see is the message of the Kaula Marga, the message of non-dual Tantra. It's like the ultimate Advaita, this sutra that Swamiji gave. One day, it was evening time, the sun was setting, and Swamiji was giving a lecture, just giving a talk to a few people. Swami Premananda was walking across with a tray in hand, probably headed to the Arati. And Swamiji, with great force, said, "Stop seeking God. See Him." That was the claim. And by the way, in Bengali, he was giving this talk in Bengali. There are no hims or hers, right? There's no gendered things like that. So it's like it, but I think we can just use her. Stop seeking her. See her. You're like, here she is, right now, right here. This is it, you guys. Like, this is God. Swamiji said that with such force that allegedly Swami Premananda froze and immediately went into samadhi, standing there, tray in hand. Isn't that remarkable? The force of that message was such a spiritual hit that Swami Premananda froze and everyone froze. And there was like a moment of silence. And then Swamiji was like, okay, you can go now. And having given that permission, Premananda regained function of his limbs and continued on his way. That's what Belramat was like in those early days, as per those reminiscences at least. These are powerful people, and Swamiji was a force of nature. He was a force from beyond nature who was, on this day in 1893, starting his transmission. And now, hopefully, we can all still feel that. So, having said all of this, there's this popular belief that Swamiji didn't like puja and stuff like that. That's not actually true. In one lecture, he said, if an idol can create a Sri Ramakrishna, because remember, his guru was a ritualist par excellence. His guru was a master pujari who was very committed to every aspect of Tāntrik theology, practice, and lifestyle. So Sri Ramakrishna was doing Purasharnas. He had formally taken Diksha and taken a Kali mantra from his guru. He had practiced on a Rudraksh mala, sitting under an Amalaki tree or a bell tree. He did the Pancha Vrikshas, what is called the Panchavati, the 5 trees, which is a tantric ritual. He sat on a Panchamundi asana, an asana of 5 skulls. Like everything about Sri Ramakrishna, at least during the time of his most intense 12-year sadhana, was textbook Tantra, especially in this period where he was doing his Tantric sadhana for Mother Kali, which I'm going to argue is his main sadhana because it's his first sadhana. The first mantra he ever took, I mean, aside from the Upanaya and the Gayatri mantra, which as a Brahmana he took at age 9, but the first like sadhana mantra he took was the Kali mantra from his guru Kedaram Bhattacharya. Of course, he would take many other mantras later. He would invent some of them even. But the first mantra he practiced with was a Kali mantra, given to him by Kedaram Bhattacharya. There's a funny story about this. Allegedly, when Sri Ramakrishna, because the guru leans into your left ear and gives the mantra, right? So allegedly, when Sri Ramakrishna first heard the Kali mantra, when he heard the first few bijas of the Kali mantra, I was told by different accounts that he screamed. And according to one reminiscence, he screamed with such force and such ferocity that even his guru was frightened and ran away. I heard that story. But generally, the story is the guru was shocked. The guru was startled with what happened. Because arguably, the guru, obviously, it's the family guru, Kula guru, is like obviously a very well established guru, a profound tantrika. But the disciple in this case was a much higher caliber than even the guru. And having given the mantra into the left ear, he was shocked to see how quickly it flowered, how quickly it produced a spiritual reaction in Sri Ramakrishna. So Sri Ramakrishna took that mantra from his guru, and then all night long he would do japa. You know, I saw his mala. You can still see it. It's in M's house, just down the street from the Star Theater, from Vivekananda's house. That's a great street, actually. Vivekananda's house is there. There's the Girish Ghosh's Star Theater. If you keep going all the way down, the Kashipur is up the street. Like, it's a beautiful street. And my favorite food is on that street. There's a statue of Netaji, and behind it, there's like a kind of a roadside stall, and we call it Netaji Piyaji. And there you get the best samosas and pakoras, and it's the best. So that street is great. But just down one alley, you'll go to M's house. There's M's property. It's been taken over by Bellarmine. It used to be its own standalone institution, actually. But in that place, there are relics up the wazoo. It's unbelievable what kind of relics they have in there. And some of my best experiences meditating, actually, in my whole life have been in that relics room. I would just set up camp there. And there's this particular room where Sri Ramakrishna's Japa Mala is. And I love that room. It's, of course, behind a grill. And it's like all kind of museum style. But it's there. And it's not like one of those Western museums where everything is so sterilized. It's preserved, it's kept safe, but you can, like, I mean, one could conceivably reach in and grab it almost. You can't, it's out of reach because obviously somebody would if somebody could. But it's conceivable. Like there's access. And there's certainly energetic access. Because that place is quite quiet, actually. I found you just go up the steps and you can sit in the corner of that room, and every now and then a pilgrim will come, make their prostrations, and leave. But generally, you are left quite alone in that room, and you just sit in the corner and just be there with Sri Ramakrishna's mala. Anyway, only like I think half of it is available. It's a big mala, pretty big rudraksh, but it's startling how smooth the beads are. Right? Yeah, the rasagula is also really great. I generally don't like Bengali sweets having a sour-oriented, spicy-oriented South Indian tongue, but I have to admit, the rasagula on that street is unbelievable. I've never had kulfi there though, but I'm sure it's great. Anyway, so in that room, you can see his mala, and it's crazy. The thing is pretty much sanded down. You can only imagine how much japa Sri Ramakrishna must have done for the rudraksh of his mala to have been sanded down. Just think of it. Like God himself incarnating on the earth does crazy intense sadhana with the mantra that he got from Kedaram Bhattacharya. And it's remarkable because like Kedaram Bhattacharya didn't have to be some great saint, some great avatar, some John the Baptist. Kedaram Bhattacharya was just a traditional Tantric guru who did his traditional role of giving a traditional mantra as per the tradition. And with that, Sri Ramakrishna realized Kali. So God himself subscribed to a tradition. God himself received a mantra in Tantric Diksha and then went to town on that mantra, chanted it on a Rudraksh mala. Not only that, all day long, Sri Ramakrishna would do puja. And we all know how he did puja. Like Sri Ramakrishna really did puja. For everyone else, it was just a job. You know, it's actually considered kind of lowly if you are a Brahmana and you are hired at a temple. It's like kind of like, it's the sex work of the Brahmin world. It's regarded as like a kind of sex work. It's like the way that we would look upon sex workers in conservative Indian society, Brahmins look upon other Brahmins who work at temples. Because you're like just getting money to worship God. It's like something about that is kind of off. And also a lot of the culture of being a temple priest is really scammy. It's like very like, oh, I'm an intermediary between people and God, so let me see how much money I can get from them. It's like that's the thing. It has a bad rep. So Sri Ramakrishna, driven by poverty and necessity, much against his will. You know, he didn't want to be a temple priest. He somehow like was almost cajoled into it by his elder brother and by the temple proprietors. So he inadvertently ended up a temple priest, much to his chagrin, but he took to it. He really took to it because he loved puja. That's one thing that's really interesting. Most of the people who are hired to be temple priests know how to do puja. Maybe to their credit, they have some interest in it, but they don't really like arguably like do it the way he did it. I mean, they don't necessarily love it. It's a job, you know, it's a job for them. They have the skill and therefore they're employable. And so a temple will pay them to do the puja, to officiate, etc., etc. But it's something that they might just do mechanically. And that's the thing that a lot of Indians growing up in India feel when they encounter temple culture or puja culture. They're like, this is fucked. I don't think this is spirituality. This is so mechanical. I ask for explanations and nobody can give me any. I had done a wedding recently for a beautiful couple, high brahmanas, very refined brahmanas. And when I asked them why they wanted to do this wedding, they explained that like when the priest did it for them 10 years ago, the priest wasn't able to explain any of the mantras. Makes me wonder if the priest even knew Sanskrit. Here he is chanting Sanskrit mantras, and he doesn't know the meaning of the mantras or the significance of the ritual. In Michigan, it was really beautiful because you could feel how the poetry of the Sanskrit mantras, when I was translating them, how they came across. You know, there was a moment when I had asked your father-in-law to like repeat something, and at first it was kind of like, oh my God, because I'd said it in Sanskrit. And I think some people actually started laughing. They were like, there's no way this guy can repeat this thing in Sanskrit. But then when I repeated it back in English, those people who were starting to snicker and laugh were immediately hushed and silenced by the reverence that the poetic sentiment evoked. And that was kind of a telling and beautiful moment, because if you know what these things mean, oh my God, they're so profound, so poetic. But very few people do know what they mean. Very few people are actually taking the time to learn the meaning of the mantras. And even if they do know the meaning of the mantras, even if they have the jnana, they might not have the bhava. So coming back to our puja class now, you'll remember that every act in puja requires at least four things: the right action, kriya, which we're hopefully in just a few moments, once I get past this rant and this ramble, we'll get into. But just like there's kriya, the right action, there's the mantra. Doing the right action with the right mantra is effectively what we mean by puja. So kriya, mantra, but then we often stress bhava, sincerity, mood. So many people have the bhava, but they don't have the kriya, nor do they have the mantra. And that's why a class like this is very important, because here you learn the kriyas, you learn the mantras, and so you give voice to your bhava. You give a way to channelize your sentiment. And you'll find that when you have structure and form, the force will double and increase. So having bhava is great, but having structure, that increases the bhava, and vice versa. Having bhava will, of course, it will force you to come to a class like this and endure this ramble in order to get to some kriya and some mantra, because that structure is going to be so juicy, so tasty when you have the bhava. You want to worship God, so you want to learn how. Now, many people know how. Many people have the kriya, they have the mantra, but they don't have the bhava. They just inherited the knowledge by virtue of being born into a family that performs puja. I think of Swami Aparanandaji and how he had contributed so much to our Hollywood Kali Puja Padati. When you guys come here for Kali Puja on October 20th, I can't wait, because I have so much history to share with you. There's so much about the Hollywood temple that you need to know and see and experience. It's a source of so much of what flows here. But anyway, Swami Aparanandaji was one of the instrumental forces in constructing the Padati that we use. And he had grown up in a Shakta Brahmana family. So you could imagine that he had inherited so many of these mantras from his family Gurukula. As a Brahmin in a Brahminical Shakta household, naturally, like, it's just going to be something that he assimilates growing up. But I imagine that you have to be a special kind of person to fall in love with that. And Swami Aparananda was. So he was able to, because of his love, really develop this padati, which I think his family might have been practicing for generations, perhaps maybe even somewhat mechanistically. I don't even know, but it is indeed the case with many Brahmana families in India that the knowledge is just mechanistically passed on as a matter of convention, culture, and tradition. At least it's passed on at all. I mean, no one can blame them. Like, don't knock it. At least that's something. But it also robs us of interacting with things in a personal way. That's why you guys have a much better shot at realizing God through this stuff. Because usually when people learn this stuff, they learn it when they're very young as part of a convention or a tradition or a culture. And that robs them of their ability to develop their own personal relationship to this stuff. But because you guys are coming to it by your own volition, hopefully, it gives you your own motivation. It gives you a deeper sense of meaning, because you recognize the poetry and beauty and power of these practices. So that being said, Sri Ramakrishna was a singularity at that time, because so many brahmanas were really just trying to make ends meet. And could you blame them? There was so much poverty. They were destitute. It was a time of colonization. The nation was being plundered. For 700 years, the Mongols had plundered the nation, and now the British had come to plunder the nation. So, like, people are poor. They're confused because every day they're told that their religions are heathen practices that will take them to hell. They're so confused, so impoverished, that you cannot blame them for their degeneration. And so Sri Ramakrishna didn't want to be a priest, but when he became a priest, he very quickly realized that what that would mean is that he would spend hours learning the puja and performing the puja. And of course he knew some puja. His brother had already taught him puja because he would actually do house calls. This is interesting. Before Sri Ramakrishna became a temple priest at Dakshineshwar, he would actually do house calls at people's houses. And he was a very popular person to hire for puja, because that's how you would say you want to worship Lakshmi, your daughter just got married or something, and so you want like wealth to come into the household, so you want a Lakshmi puja, but you don't know how to do it. So you hire a brahmana to come to your house and do the Lakshmi puja, but you supply the brahmana everything. You pay for all the wood for the homa, you pay for the flowers, you sponsor the puja. And so by sponsoring the puja, you get the merit of the puja. But in order for the puja to be performed, you need someone who knows how to do it. So the brahmana comes, is paid to perform the puja, and you get the merit of the puja. That's how the convention was and is. So what happened was Sri Ramakrishna would go and he would do the puja, but then, and this is so interesting, he would stick around afterwards, which is very rare. Usually these pandits, these brahmanas would come, do the puja as quickly as possible. Sri Ramakrishna also made jokes about this because generally the general public don't know about puja. It's easy to befuddle them. So if you have a book, a padati, Sri Ramakrishna would joke, these people turn 4 or 5 pages at a time. And he would say these types of pandits, they don't actually mean to do the puja correctly. So you'll see them cutting corners When they chant the Chandi, he says, look at them, they're flipping 4 or 5 pages at a time. So he used to mercilessly make fun of these religious hypocrites, who were peddling religion, and it's a priestcraft. Anyway, Sri Ramakrishna was different because he's not like all the other girls. When he would show up to one of these things, he would just stick around afterwards. He wouldn't rush off to his next engagement. He would sing for them. He would host satsangs with them, and everyone enjoyed his presence in their house because he wouldn't just do the puja that he was paid to do. He would also administer God, and so he was very popular. He would go to houses and hang out. Anyways, he was already acquainted with puja, but this was Kali puja. This was something else. And when he became, at age 19, interestingly enough, the head priest at the Kali temple, largely because his elder brother who was in that role died, he had to learn Kali Puja. So he took this mantra from Keraram Bhattacharya. What he had already learned from his brother, he fortified. He learned Kali Puja. And my God, he took to it. So I often like to remind everyone that we are in the lineage of one of the greatest pujaris who ever lived. At the Kali Mandir in Laguna Beach, Swami Bhajanandaji said something really beautiful one day. He said, in this house, Sri Ramakrishna is the pujari. It's a nice idea that like nobody knows how to worship Ma like Sri Ramakrishna can worship Ma. So your best bet at appeasing Ma is to let Ramakrishna possess you and do the puja through you. So we worship Ramakrishna to become Ramakrishna because only Ramakrishna can worship Ma. Only Ramakrishna can love Ma the way Ma deserves to be loved. I don't want to love Ma with anything less than a Ramakrishnan love. And so I chant my Thakur mantras and worship Thakur and hope for that grace. Because if anything, he was the greatest lover Ma ever had in this world. Just like Radha was the greatest lover Krishna ever had, Sri Ramakrishna was the greatest lover Ma Kali ever had. And so much so that the only thing Ramakrishna could have been is Kali herself. Because the only person who could love Kali so infinitely is Kali. So Kali herself incarnated as Ramakrishna in order to love herself as Kali. And these aren't my thoughts. This is Swami Vivekananda himself saying this. There was Swami Vivekananda's quote that I'm sure of it, he said, Mother Kali herself dredged up this body called Ramakrishna for her own ends. And what are those ends? Maybe it's as simple as loving herself, loving on herself, showing the world what love really means. And like I said, it's a desperate, dark, depraved kind of love, a mad kind of love, a love that claims your whole mind. It makes every other kind of love look like shopkeeping. The kind of love that will kill you, that will ruin your life, that will destroy the world. That's the kind of love that Kali craves, and that's the kind of apocalyptic fury that Sri Ramakrishna brought to his devotions, to his puja. So puja was important for Sri Ramakrishna because without puja, he wouldn't have had a way to articulate his love. And you could see how puja was the fan that fanned the fires of his desire. That was an important point. Many people, unfortunately, these days will say that Sri Ramakrishna attained Kali through yearning alone. Bullshit. I don't buy it for a second. The only people who are saying this are people who would demean the tantras, who would demean the puja tradition, who have no respect for mantra or mantra diksha, because they're also ready to dismiss the heroic sadhanas that Sri Ramakrishna performed in the name of his yearning. They all say, oh, he just sat there and yearned for Ma. He just cried, oh Ma, oh Ma, oh Ma. Hare, how diligently he learned puja, how perfectly he performed it. All night he was doing japa. His longing, his desire for Ma was articulated along clearly Tāntrik lines. So anyway, he's doing japa. All night long he's doing japa. Of course, what to say? He can't sleep. He's obsessed with Ma. And by the way, when you're in love, it's like that too, right? It's like you're just excited all the time. You're just turned all the time. And so imagine this kind of love. So he loves Ma, he's obsessed with Ma, and he's worshipping Ma all day. First of all, he's learning the puja and then he's performing the puja. And then all night he's doing japa and just he's sitting in the jungle naked, by the way. There's a beautiful scene where one of his Hridoy follows him and sees that he's not only naked, but he's taken off his sacred thread and placed it on the tree, on a branch or something. And Hridoy is scandalized, like, oh my God, you took off your sacred thread? And Sri Ramakrishna said, yes, when one worships mother, one must finish with all such notions as caste and etc. etc. So Sri Ramakrishna would sit naked, as per the Tantric scriptures, with hair wild and free. There was a time when his hair was all long and matted, and he would sit there under the Amalaki tree or under the bell tree, and all night long he would worship Ma on a Panchamundi asana. I once asked if I could sit on his Panchamundi asana. And the person who I was with, the sadhu who I was with at that time, he laughed in my face and he said, you would become Bhasma. And I immediately agreed. I was like, yeah, it's okay. I didn't even, by the way, you would think that I would have some clap back of like, yeah, I'm ready to be Bhasma. No, the way he said it, I was like, yeah, you're right. I don't want to do that. Like, I got it. My desire to sit on Sri Ramakrishna's asana immediately dissolved when I heard that claim. Because yeah, like can you imagine how powerful it is? And generally we shouldn't sit on anyone else's panchamundi. This is good ethics. Don't sit on someone else's panchamundi. I don't know, I was being cheeky that time. I was like, well, if it's there, maybe I should just go ahead anyway. So you have your own panchamundi. But Sri Ramakrishna had his own panchamundi. He had 5 trees, which eventually he planted himself. But before that, before he planted the 5 trees, before the Panchavati, he would sit by the Ganga, but that was too public because people would walk by and see him. So he went deeper and deeper into the forest until he was all by himself in the middle of the night. It's a jungle. There are snakes. There's all sorts of creatures and ghosts. And he was never scared. He would always go to the cremation grounds by himself late at night. But anyway, and by the way, before this, in Kamarpukur also, he would spend a lot of time at the cremation ground and he would bring with him 2 jars of food, one for the jackals and one for the ghosts. That's an interesting point because that means he was fluent in the tantric discipline of performing sadhana in smashans because he knows how to appease ghosts. And by the way, one time Rameshwar followed him. He was lost. Nobody knew where he was. He was in the smashan meditating. So all around the village they were looking for him, and Rameshwar was calling out his name, Gadai, Gadai, Gadai. And they got to the smashan, and then Sri Ramakrishna from the smashan said, Rameshwar, don't come any further. The ghost might harm you. Just a minute, I'll be right there. It's a remarkable thing. Like he was fluent in the world of spirits. He knew how to assuage them. He could do sadhanas in smashans. He could do sadhanas under the bell tree. Like this is a tantric, right? Like this is it's a textbook worshipper of Mother Kali sitting naked in the middle of the night under a bell tree, chanting on a Panchamundi asana. So he's doing that all night. Now during the day, this was peculiar. When Sri Ramakrishna performed puja, he would become so absorbed in his worship that the puja would take hours and hours and hours. Where it would otherwise be a 45-minute affair, the way that Sri Ramakrishna did puja, expanded the puja to like a 3, 4, 5 hour kind of thing. Maybe sometimes the whole day he would just be doing puja. That's interesting. That shows you something, right? It shows you that puja as a practice has the potential to like consume your whole day in the fire of devotion and rapture. Like it's just something you could just get lost in and derive meaning and benefit from. But you guys, you have to work harder. That's the thing. Like Kuleshwari and I were just talking about this the other day. Yeah, we did a puja and Kuleshwari, so now she's possessed. Now her brain is on fire and she needs to like learn more because she has an insatiable appetite to learn puja. But I applaud that attitude. She sent me a few texts. I tried to dissuade her. You're perfect already, Ma. You're already Kali. Don't get trapped in ritualism. And she's like, yeah, yeah, but no, we need to get to work. And like, correct. You have to like test a little bit. And so I really appreciate that because it's like a lot of people come to me saying they want to learn, but they don't want to learn. At least they can't handle the heat in the kitchen if they really wanted to learn. I'm really willing to show you Homa and show you Puja, but you have to come and sit with me. You have to shadow me. You have to watch how I move around in the world. And you have to really observe. And it's not easy. Like the Sanskrit mantras you have to learn, and you have to learn faster. That's the thing. There's just like, come on, turn on. Let's go. Be present. I'm teaching, learn now. That's the thing. You have to pick up faster. And you have to be a little more retentive. So you can't forget what you learn. Like that kind of thing. There's a regiment. There's like a kind of discipline that is there actually at the center of the tradition. Should you want it? Should you crave it? And if you come looking for it, you'll get it, obviously. But the case with Sri Ramakrishna was that, and why? Why would you want it? Because you sense the power of it. The reason people don't want to learn puja is because they don't yet sense what it is. They don't understand how important it can be. And because it's so important, a little bit of tough love is required sometimes when it comes to puja. And so Sri Ramakrishna got that from his gurus and he himself administered it to some of his disciples. But because of that discipline and because of that hard work, he had cultivated a practice that he could do for the whole day. He could just sit there. And it was such a powerful practice that he would lose himself in it. Bhuta Shuddhi would be samadhi for him. He would just be sitting there with like perfect concentration, absorbed in Bhuta Shuddhi, where most priests would blitz through that section in 10 minutes, just mumble the mantras and continue. Sri Ramakrishna was there, absorbed in samadhi. Yes. Yeah, and that's the thing. Don't think you can learn it in the course of a single retreat either. It's a year, 2 years, 3 years of constant work to even begin having some kind of fluency with it. But anyway, that being said, Sri Ramakrishna would be in samadhi or like kind of some trance state when he was doing Bhuta Shuddhi. And when he would give the food offerings, he would go crazy. He wouldn't leave his worshipper's seat until he was convinced that the mother in the image ate the food. You only really ever saw that with people like Vamakepa and Komalakanta and Ramprasad, these like crazy ecstatic Shaktas. They literally saw a mother in the image. You know, when they looked at the image, they didn't see stone or brass or anything like that. That was the living goddess. And Sri Ramakrishna wasn't building hospitals or dispensaries. He wasn't out there like helping with the flood or with the famine relief or anything. He was sitting on his asan, the worshipper's seat, in the shrine of a temple, looking at a stone image of Kali and feeling her living presence there. And the force of his projection was such that the statue would talk to him, dance with him, and actually eat the food. So anyway, he would take the food and he would literally shove it into the mouth of the statue. He's like, Ma, please, please eat the food. I just made the offering. I said the mantras. Now please just eat the food. Like, he would go crazy when he didn't feel the food was being eaten, you know? So he would push it, push it, push it, push it into the mouth. And then mother would laugh at him. He would hear mother saying, no, no, you eat it first. How can a mother eat before her child eats? Please, you eat some of this food and then I will eat the food. And then, of course, he would start eating the food that was supposed to be for Ma. And the other priest who were nearby would see that and lose their shit. Because you're desecrating the food. You're licking the food that you're going to give Ma. What is this, Matangi? This Kali Ma, the queen of the temple, and you are serving her like she's some kind of Uchishta Chandalini or some kind of. Oh, look, this is blasphemy. But in the name of love, in the ecstasy of devotion, Sri Ramakrishna was committing blasphemies within the structure of the orthodox puja that he had learned. So he was eating the food, and only after he had eaten the food, then to his imagination or in his experience, mother would eat it. You know, he used to hold his finger under the nose, or they said cotton or glass, just to feel if she was breathing or not. And verily, he would feel the perspiration. Swamiji would say later, it was all in his head. You know, because it's true. A lot of these were only true for him. Like if you were in the room, you wouldn't see what he was seeing probably. You might feel it if you were sensitive, but he would just be having a whole conversation with a wall. And for him, mother is sitting right there wearing a bright red Varanasi sari, and he has a kind of intimacy with her. You might be talking to him, and then he might trail off and suddenly have a conversation on the side about you. You know, you might be like, "Can I have a vision of the Divine Mother?" And he'd be like, "Mother, give him a vision." No, he's to have knowledge, not a vision. Knowledge? When, mother? Now? Oh, mother told me that. You know, like stuff like that. He would be in the middle of a conversation with Kali, but you wouldn't be seeing her, obviously. And so, of course, everybody thought he was mad because he was. For all intents and purposes, he was mad. Now imagine you have a job to do. You're paid. You're a salaried priest. People are waiting for the end of the puja so they can have prasad. But instead, here you are for hours trying to get a statue to eat the food, pushing the food into the statue's mouth and then eating it yourself, or going crazy and like feeding a cat or something like that. And there were really even much more disturbing things that would happen. Sri Ramakrishna would start worshipping himself, like worshipping his own penis as a lingam, or putting flowers on his own head. He started worshipping his own body. Like this kind of madness, we all of us like to fake it usually because we like to get to that stage, that radical like Kaula stage where we're transgressing all the rules. But you have to remember that Sri Ramakrishna arrived at that state having first mastered the rules. Would there really be a John Coltrane in kind of, sorry, would there really be a Giant Steps or a Love Supreme Coltrane if there wasn't a kind of blue Coltrane? Everybody tells me about how great Coltrane is because he doesn't follow the rules, but it's only because they haven't heard him on Miles Davis's records. This is a master. You know, this guy has like mastered music. That's why you get Giant Steps and Love Supreme. So the claim that we're making now is this is the expectation of you. Swamiji came. You know, don't you know we're at war? The expectation is that you're literally perfect in this stuff. You're perfect in your Sanskrit grammar, puja. You're perfect in every, like literally be better. That's what Swamiji is inspiring us all to do. Like it put in the time, you know. So Sri Ramakrishna, he put in the time, he learned the puja, he did the puja, and then he got to this state where the puja did him. And he would offer flowers to himself and spend hours. And there's a beautiful thing where he would spend hours just fanning. That was one thing that he was very fond of doing. And we actually knew someone like that. I never met him. He was a bit before my time. But many people that I know were with him and took mantras with him. And he's kind of like a precedent for us here in this part of the world. His name is Haridan Chakrabarti, one of the great, great priests of Dakshineshwar. He married into Sri Ramakrishna's family. You might not know this, but every priest in the Dakshineshwar temple has to be in Sri Ramakrishna's family. Do you know that? It's a really interesting thing. But they're all in Sri Ramakrishna's family. Haridan, he was initiated in the Tarapit lineage, Vamakepa's lineage by Tarakepa, but he married into Sri Ramakrishna's family and became one of the most ecstatic and like influential priests. Anyway, he had this like really cool afro and he would wear all red and you could see like he was really like Ma's child. And he used to worship with fire and force and gusto. Swami Bhajanananda told me that Haridan Chakrabarti is the greatest pujari he's ever seen, and his pronunciation was terrible. He had a very thick Bengali accent, so he was barely able to actually pronounce the Sanskrit mantras. Actually, he was really good at pronunciation, but like he would get in such a mood that everything would be so Banglaized, and he would slur everything and kind of like get into this kind of what he did was jazz, honestly. Like he was like the John Coltrane of Pūjā. And he too would spend hours just fanning the murti, like Sri Ramakrishna. So Sri Ramakrishna would spend hours at Arati ringing the bell, fanning the murti, or he would just like wave light for hours in front of the murti. Can you imagine being in a state where all you want to do for the next 2 or 3 hours is stand there and wave a yaktail whisk at a bronze statue? Like how absorbed you have to be. And so with Haridan, and this is the reason why I bring him up, this would happen to him. Like people saw this and they told me that whenever this would happen, the other priest would say, "Oh, he's in a mood." Or no, sorry, out of mind, out of mind. That's what they would say. Out of mind. That was the term that they would use for Haridan whenever this kind of eccentricity overtook him. When he would just stand there and wave the fan, or whenever he would do something eccentric, usually in the context of puja, because he was usually very grounded and stern and outside of puja. But like when he was doing puja, he would have these moments and they would say, "Oh, Haruda is what they called him. That was his like name. Haruda is out of mind," they would say. I heard this from Ushama. What a beautiful thought to be out of mind. And this shows you that what Sri Ramakrishna experienced in puja can be experienced by all of us because it was just experienced by a contemporary of ours, a recent teacher of ours who's only one generation before us, Haruda, Haridan Chakrabarti. If you get a chance, it would be really cool to Google that name. I'll put it in the description of this video maybe, and you can see pictures of him. You'll see this is a fierce Bhairava of Ma. And not only that, there's recordings of him doing puja, and they are gorgeous. Like on the Kali Mandir Bandcamp, and it's just like kalimandirbandcamp.com or something like that. On the Kali, I forget, I don't know. You can find it better than me. But on the Bandcamp, there are live recordings of Kali Pujas. There's like volume 1, volume 2, and there are recordings of Haridan Chakrabarti, Haruda singing Durga Ashtakam or Durga hymns to Durga. You can hear his mantras. Like it's really something worth hearing. Now, Ushama at the Kali Mandir, she makes movies, of course. And she put out a beautiful movie, her like signature film called A Day at Dakshineshwar. We've seen it together. We screen it here quite often, every year, maybe 2 or 3 times. There you can see Haridan worshipping, and you see how he flows with the flower, how he prepares his kosha kushi, how he dips his hand into the kosha kushi, how he offers fire. It's jazz. And when you look at that, you're like, what I'm looking at now is an art form. It's a dance. The mudras are a kind of dance. The mantras are a kind of music and a kind of poetry. And the whole thing is art. It's so aesthetically rich, the way you place flowers. There's a manual dexterity. There's a linguistic flexibility. There's an intellectual agility. And there's an emotional depth to puja that makes you feel like this is one of the most sophisticated art forms in the world. And you can see how so many different art forms are involved in this one art form. And if you are any kind of human with the least sensitivity to beauty, you'll fall in love with puja. And that's my only hope for everyone here in this puja class is that you fall in love with the poetry and the aesthetic glory of puja. And so when you watch Haridan do puja, you're like, this is an artist. Look at him. His pujas are so beautiful. Anyway, so Haruda was there. And Sri Ramakrishna, like Haruda, like Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Ramakrishna would just spend hours. So the thing I'm trying to convey right now, I think, although it's really hard for me to do so because I'm getting lost in the meandering joy of this discussion. But Asha taught me so many new words, and one of them is gander. I learned the word gander. So I'm on a gander right now, meandering about. So Sri Ramakrishna, he would go crazy and imagine all day long he would perform puja in the shrine room, just like in his own way, going crazy. And then when the sun would set, after a whole day's worth of puja, he would roll on the ground. And this is a legendary story. He would rub his face on the earth so hard with such gusto that he would bleed sometimes, just rubbing his face on the ground. Like you can imagine Swamiji bashing his face on the grill, like that. Sri Ramakrishna is on the floor, like rubbing his face on the ground with such fervor because he's crying out, Ma, 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 another day has passed and still I have not seen you. And here we are, we're so content that the pages of the calendar just flip one after another. And we have this opportunity to experience the greatest beauty and joy in life. And what are we doing? We're not even taking the time to like really learn it. What a waste. We'll get to the end of our life and we'll realize, oh my God, I could have learned this thing. I could have done this practice. I could have had a direct, immediate experience of Ma. I could have been on talking terms with God. I could have been a saint. I could have been a mystic. And what did I do? I fussed about how to learn that I never actually sat down and learned, or something like that. It's a tragedy. So many of us get to the end of our life and we realize we absolutely fucking blew it. Do you know why? Because of our to-do list. Because there are so many things that for some reason we have tricked ourselves into thinking is more important, like social dynamics, like the drama and some sanghas, like all these other things that take up so much of our time. And at the end of the day, what are they worth? And so, like, the purpose of life is to realize God. And Sri Ramakrishna would take people aside. He would take them to the temple, like Ishan. Ishan was very devoted, actually, very powerful practitioner. But he was also involved in a lot of Brahmo Samaj type things, I think. And he was doing a lot of litigation. He was a lawyer, I think, by trade. So he thought he was doing good work. He thought he was doing important work. So Sri Ramakrishna one time took him aside and was like, why don't you just try being mad for God? It's really beautiful. It's in the gospel, in the Kathamrita. There's a scene where Sri Ramakrishna takes Ishan into the temple, does a little kind of ritualism, like offers a flower or something, and then comes down from the temple, from the dais, and says to Ishan, why don't you try being mad for God? Enough of your litigation. He says, enough of your litigation. Be mad. Be mad with God. Be intoxicated with God. And Swami Vivekananda would later repeat this to people at Belrumat like a mantra. People would come to him and he would say, Sadhu, be drunk. That's what he would tell people always. Sadhu, be drunk. Be mad with God. And that means that all you care about is Kali. And by the way, you guys, I'm preaching to the choir because if you've come to Kali, then you're already that type of lover. Kali is the kind of deity that like obsesses your mind. Like usually people come and they have many deities. Give it a moment. Soon you won't have the kind of mind that is able to like, it's like if you stare in a fire so long and then you look away and the world is on fire. She like will literally put out your eyes, and you will not be able to see another deity. I told someone the other day there was a kirtan going on, and I stepped outside, and a very perceptive person was like, "Ah, I'm starting to understand you more. There are certain kirtans that will scare you away. There are certain energies, certain colors, certain foods, certain things that will scare you away." So we're having that conversation about energies, and I got into a mood, and I said, "Yes, something happened. Now it's like Mordor." I was like talking about how like Frodo, there's like a line where he says, "All I see is the eye." It's like that. The whole thing is a wasteland. It's desolate. And I was saying, I can't inside my heart hear bird song or like there's no breeze in Vrindavan. I can't smell Vrindavan. There are no leaves, there's no shade, there's no breeze. There's no sound of a flute. It has long since been silenced or smothered by the howling of coyotes. We heard it in the forest late at night as we were doing that Homa, that blood-curdling shout in the forest. There'll come a day maybe when we close our eyes and that's like really all we hear. Or like there's just a sense of the smashan, not a Vrindavan tree in sight. Not that Vrindavan isn't great, but there's a time when we can't go into Kameshwara's palace anymore and see Kameshwari because she's so beautiful and her palace so refined. And me, I'm covered in blood and who knows what else, having spent the night with ghosts and jackals in the smashan. There's something about Mother Kali, and this might be totally anecdotal, but it seems to be the case for many people who are tuned to her. There's something about her. Ours is a jealous God. What is it? Like there's like a line in the Bible where it's like you should have no gods but Allah. Like that kind of thing. It's not even like that. The sentiment is not like you have to love this person. You can't help but love this person if you meet her. Like the thing about Kali is that she's so powerful as an energy that to even glimpse her, to touch her in the slightest way, she'll take over everything. The whole mind is now hers. Your whole life is now hers. And everything that you thought was valuable in life, she's devoured. That's why people are scared of her, because of her power to obsess you. Very few, I think, energies in the world have this level of dark depravity as Kali. So, of course, we teach a lot of Sri Vidya here because a lot of what we do in the Kali sadhana is rooted in Sri Vidya. As you'll see today, I'm going to give you some Sri Vidya mantras actually. We'll get to that in just a moment if we can. I'm trying, but the thing about Kali, and even if you understand it within a Sri Vidya context, a lot of what we do is within a Sri Vidya context. But the thing about Kali, the thing about Ma, Devi, is she has this power of obsession, and you could say it's a kind of madness where she becomes your sole priority. Nothing else in life kind of turns you on the way that she does. And everything else is only understood in her light. It's done for her. You only eat after giving her food. Like your life is puja. Basically, everything becomes about the day's puja. You wake up in the morning excited for the day's puja, and it keeps you up all night, and then that's it. Your life is just hers. So Sri Ramakrishna would say to people, "Sadhu, be drunk, be intoxicated," when they were busy with things in the world. And that's how we are. We're busy with things in the world, but we don't really start making spiritual progress until we give our mind fully to this dark, demented goddess. So that's the idea. Sri Ramakrishna had that all day long, all night long. He was doing these sadhanas, fanning the flames of his desire. And you know what? People don't know this because they don't understand Bali. You can't really understand Kali without understanding Panchamakara. You can't really understand her without understanding Bali. I mean, maybe you can, but it's more likely that you will understand her bhava when you understand the traditions around her. And Sri Ramakrishna was very much plugged into those traditions. So Bali means animal sacrifice. Now, Sri Ramakrishna had to perform one last sacrifice in order to experience Kali. Do you know what that was? It's human sacrifice. And probably he had participated in some goat sacrifice. We don't know for sure. There was a time in his life when he couldn't tolerate it. We talked about that. But there was a final thing that he did. He offered a human sacrifice. Do you know this about Sri Ramakrishna? Sri Ramakrishna only realized Kali after he offered human sacrifice. And that's part of Kali's world. And sacrifice Bali, it's one of the scariest things about her. Anyway, whose head? His own head. There's like a moment where he realizes that all the sadhana that he's done is for naught. He hasn't realized Ma, no matter how much japa he's performed, he's done so much japa that his mala is smoothed down. He's done so much puja, he's felt mother in so many different ways, but he hasn't realized her. Just imagine all the bliss and ecstasy that he's experienced, it's not enough for him. He has to have her, more than just as a fleeting experience. So, filled with a kind of rapture, he gets up and takes the dagger. By the way, this is the kadaga used for the bali. This is the sword that you use to chop off the goat's head. That's significant. He takes the goat's sword, and we saw it actually. It's displayed in a side room in Dakshineshwar. It's eerie, actually. This sword, you look at, you're like, once upon a time, a priest in this temple was so obsessed with Kali that he literally picked up this sword and tried to cut his own head off. Now, many of us think, oh, this is like suicidal ideation. Yes, but you have to understand it in the context of Kali. It's Bali. Right? It's like Sri Ramakrishna performing a human sacrifice with his own head because that's how you're supposed to worship Kali. It's like you can't describe it. The ones who worship Kali will only be understood by the others who worship Kali. To everyone else, they're a psychopath. Just there's a reason why we stay in our smashans and don't come out because we are reprehensible people. Kali worshippers, reprehensible people. The things that I have done, oh my God. Anyway, so Sri Ramakrishna takes this sword and he's about to cut his own neck, at which point he realizes Ma. So you could say the culmination, as it were, of Sri Ramakrishna's Tāntrik sadhana for the first 12 years has two phases. One is the Bali that he performed as a result of many years of puja and many years of japa. But the other one is the Lalita Tripura Sundari one, the Shodashi one, which I think is more mysterious and equally important, if not arguably more important. It's the Kaula Yaga. We say in the Tantra Loka, right? Like Abhinavagupta points out that the ultimate ritual is the worship of God in a woman's body. That's the highest ritual, and only the highest adhikari people can perform it because it requires that the worshipper be Bhairava himself. Only Bhairava can worship Bhairavi. So until you become a realized soul, you won't be able to worship Ma because only Bhairava can worship Bhairavi. So Sri Ramakrishna had attained his Bhairavahood by virtue of offering his own head in sacrifice after long, hard years of uninterrupted puja and japa. This is life. His life is just puja, japa, puja, japa, puja, japa, and crying, 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 praying, praying, praying. I should also mention that music plays a big role in all of this. Like learning songs and singing songs and dancing was very important. So he would spend hours just dancing in the shrine room in front of Ma, with Ma. He would spend hours singing Ram Prasad songs. He never composed his own music. The really remarkable thing about Sri Ramakrishna, he was so creative. He was a great artist. He could sculpt, he could draw. He was just a great poet and what do you call it? A great actor. He was so gifted artistically, but he didn't compose his own music. I mean, sometimes he would improvise when there were kirtanwalas there, but he was much more likely to sing songs that he had learned. And his favorite was Ram Prasad. He really resonated with Ram Prasad's bhava because Ram Prasad had this kind of intimacy with Kali where he didn't mind cursing her, complaining to her, scolding her, just the way a child might scold his own mother. Ram Prasad would bicker with the Divine Mother. And Sri Ramakrishna liked that. He liked that tamasik bhakti, as most of us Shaivas and Shaktas do. So he would sing songs, he would dance, he would do japa, he would do puja. Just for a moment, imagine what a blessed life that is. All day long, from morning till night and maybe all night, your only job is to love on Ma, to sing, to dance, to perform puja, to chant your mantra. Like just imagine that ecstasy, that fervor. But anyway, after all of that, for years of that, Sri Ramakrishna still couldn't attain Ma. And so with one final moment, with one stroke of the sword, he was ready to end it all, to give Ma his head. And this is, I think this should tell you something. Are you ready to die now? Like, let me just ask you, and I'm gonna ask you with fire and fury in front of Ma. If I ask you now for your head, will you give it? Can you give it? Do you have people at home that you have to take care of? Do you have responsibilities? Are you ready to give me your head now if I asked for it? You think I'm joking? If I ask you for your head in human sacrifice one day when I'm worshiping Ma, will you gladly give it to me? In other words, I'm asking, are you ready to die now for this thing that you profess to love? Is it the most important thing in your life? So much so that you're willing to give up anything and everything? And please, I don't need an answer right now. It's a rhetorical question. Like, just think about it. Obviously, I'm never going to ask this of you. Just relax, chill. Some of you recently took mantra and you're like, wait, fuck. We were kind of joking about this, but no, no, don't worry. Like, no, chill. Ma will, though. Do you know? She will ask this of you. You should understand, like, you spend all day long looking at an image of a woman holding a sword, and you're not thinking that this sword is aimed at your neck. It's aimed at your neck. I mean, why are you so glib about it? You're going to die, and horrifically and painfully, after having everything you love torn away from you. Will you say yes or what? Like, or are we just wasting our time here? Like, what kind of relationship is this? Let's just like define the relationship now so everyone is clear. You know, like this is what Kali expects of us and of Sri Ramakrishna. She loves us like that. She will cut off her own head for us and has and will again and again and again. She will kill for us, she will die for us. And the sad thing is that so few of us are willing to match her in that love, in that intensity, in that fervor. Sri Ramakrishna, though, he, like I said, is the only one who ever loved her. So he offered his own head to her. He just like was ready. But you know what? It's like Abraham. I keep thinking of the Isaac Abraham kind of sacrifice where it's like it's not maybe the sacrifice, although we shouldn't say that because then you're like, oh, well, it's only the willingness and not the sacrifice. I mean, sometimes it might actually be about the sacrifice. There is someone, Panilal Bhattacharya, a great singer of Ma Kali, who killed himself in Kali's name and actually died. So it's not like she's gonna suddenly show up and be like, wait, no, I only wanted to test you and see that you were willing to do it. No, some people she just allows to do it. You know, like some people she's watching, she's like, oh yeah, you're gonna give me your head? Yeah? Okay, let's see. Good. Next life. 9 lives later, you're still doing it, then finally she'll reveal herself to you. That's what happened to Kalidasa, India's greatest poet. 9 lives he gave his head. On the 10th life, he saw Kali. If you're willing to do that, if you're willing to give 9 of your heads in 9 incarnations to Kali, you don't know which one you're on right now. Your 10th incarnation, you'll be the greatest poet the world has ever known. Think about it. Think about the rewards that are here. That won't matter to you though. And those rewards won't keep you in the game because they're not as good they're not good enough for that moment when you have no one in the world and you're alone in the smashan and you don't even know whether or not she's a demon. Like there's a moment when you're like, wait, is this just Satanism? When she appears and you see the blood pouring from her mouth and her sick and twisted smile and her hair and her skin, I'm sure there will be this moment where you're like, I'm in the wrong religion. This was all a cool aesthetic. It was all goth and cool and all until now. Because right now I'm actually scared. Like she's taller than I thought. She's scarier than I thought, and I'm scared. And also it's energetic. Like the nadis, it's so uncomfortable. It's like the skin is just too small for the body, and it's so uncomfortable. There's so much fire in your brain. Dave will know what I'm talking about. Like your nerves are just on fire. It's like, and then you're like, this can't be it. Like this can't be God. This is a demon. Why is there blood? Why are there weapons? Why is it so scary? You know, there's like that moment. And so we are now preparing for that moment, which is inevitable. She will appear by right now being clear as to what that means. We'll lose our head. I like how in Alice in Wonderland, they're threatened with execution, the Mad Hatter and his friends in the Tim Burton movie. And then Johnny Depp's character says, they say, "Oh, we'll have your head. Well, you say you'll lose your heads." And he laughs and he says, we already lost them. And the question of like, if you've already lost your heads before she comes to take your head, it's going to be really smooth. But what if she comes to take your head? Are we ready? And Sri Ramakrishna was ready. And it wasn't until he was ready to give his own head that she appeared. It's a really remarkable thing. So anyway, he finished his sadhana with human sacrifice, with his own head. And so once he was ready to do that, she was ready to appear. Now that all happened, right? But there was another moment. a crowning moment, a beautiful moment that came after, which was when he worshipped Sarada Devi as the goddess Shodashi. So you could even argue like there's a kind of inner secret to Kali sadhana. And you find it in Sri Vidya often. It's exoterically presented in Sri Vidya, but esoterically, I would argue its source is the Kaula Yaga. And by Sri Vidya, I'm talking about Kaula Marga Sri Vidya. And you find that in the worship of Sarada Devi on Palaharani Kali Puja. So that's when Sri Ramakrishna finished his sadhana formally. I mean, you could say that he experienced Ma when he was ready to offer his own head as a result of long, arduous years of puja and japa. But that was only the beginning of his spiritual life, not the end, because from that point on, he would encounter guru after guru who would help fill out his spiritual personality. So it was only after he experienced Ma that he learned all the 64 Bhairavagamas from Bhairavi Brahmani. Like I was making a point earlier this week on Monday that like sometimes the Kaula Marga stuff, it might just be what you do after you realize Ma, to flesh out that realization. It might not even be a means to Ma, it might be a means post Ma almost to experience her and everything. But having said that, it's also a means to Ma, and Sri Ramakrishna verified those means. He, upon realizing Ma, acquired a guru, Bhairavi Brahmani, and from that guru, he learned all these very difficult sadhanas. Like he would eat out of a skull bowl, right? And there's like a scene where he cooks his fish curry in a skull bowl and eats his fish curry out of the skull bowl, performing all sorts of sadhanas that, of course, the mission might like to forget he did, or they might not want you to know that he did. But he did all kinds of crazy, controversial sadhanas, and he realized God through that. And so he was able to say, like, oh yeah, this is all true. All the Bhairava Agamas, all the Vamachara stuff, all the Kaula Marga stuff, true. Tantra is true. But notice how much of his life was Tantra, like how much of it was Tantric. From the first time he got his mantra, Kali mantra, all the way to that Bali, to the experience of Ma, all throughout his years with Bhairavi Brahmani, all of that was intensely Tantric. And his final ritual was Tantric too. So his first ritual is Tantric, and his final ritual is Tantric also. And what was that ritual? The worship of his own wife as the goddess. He put her on the pedestal, literally, and after having performed all the preliminaries on the Palaharani Kali Puja day, he used the Shodashi mantra, or maybe the Panchadashi mantra. That's what my guru told me. Some Sri Vidya mantra in order to worship her as the goddess Shodashi. And I think that was it. That was like, and according to Abhinavagupta in the Tantra Loka in chapter 29, that's the culminating sadhana. And what is it really but the ability to see God in a human body? That's the Kaula Marga. That's it. If there's nothing else to learn about the Kaula Marga, it's this. It is the divinization of the body. There is no God but this body, that body. This whole world is God's body. Body is divine. And to worship God in a human body is the highest possible worship. It's the acme of spiritual life. Because once you're able to worship God in a human body, then you stop seeking God. You see her. God's transcendence becomes articulated in the immanent. Then we are a Vijnanavadin, arguably. Then we are drinking the milk, not just knowing about it or talking about it. Then we are playing with our beloved God in every way, shape, and form, in everything as every person. So at this point, Sri Ramakrishna surrendered his japa mala. Like as he finished his worship, the story goes, he took his mala, which for his whole sadhana he was chanting on, and he laid it up at Shodashi's feet. That was it. He surrendered. He said, Guyate Guya Goptritvam, Grihanasmat Kritam Japam, Siddhir Bhavatu Me Devi, Tvat Prasadan Maheshwari. Oh goddess, you are the secret of all secrets. You are the protectress of secrets. Make me perfect. Please accept this chanting of this mantra. All of it was done by thy grace alone. Tat Prasadan Maheshwari. You are the ruler of the universe here. And that was it. That was the last formal ritual that Sri Ramakrishna ever performed. And it was on Palaharni Kali Puja, new moon night, in the privacy of his own room with his own wife. He had performed the Kaula Yaga. And I think there's controversy around this. I think the extent to which he performed Kaula Yaga is debated. Were they united in Samadhi? Hey man, believe what you want to believe. But like it was the Kaula Yaga. And we know that the Kaula Yaga is described in detail in Tantra Loka. We know that Sri Ramakrishna, insofar as he's doing a Kaula Sri Vidya type thing, I don't know, like that tracks that what Abhinavagupta is saying is the acme of spiritual life, the ultimate ritual, is what Sri Ramakrishna concluded his formal sadhanas with in like the 1850s. So what we have here is an example of a super tantric, a person who followed all the systems of Tantra and realized their full and absolute potential. But, and now coming back to Swami Vivekananda, what do we make of him? He wanted to throw all the bells into the river. he told Sashi that the only thing he ever feared was the sound of the bells. He wanted us to worship God the hungry, God the sick, God the wicked. He said, may I incarnate again and again and again, 1,000, and suffer innumerable hells if only I get to worship the one God I love. My God, the sum total of all souls. My God the sick. My God the wicked. My God the poor. So that means we seem to have two ideals. One tells us to get out of the ritual room and plunge into the world and do some work for others. The other tells us to sit all day long on the asan, doing japa, performing puja, singing songs of divine ecstasy, and forgetting the world. How will you reconcile these two things? Sri Ramakrishna seems to be a textbook mystic of the Tantric tradition. Sri Ramakrishna seems to be a modern reformer, teaching us to worship the way Buddha taught us to worship. But again, Buddhism is the fulfillment of Hinduism. So coming back to Swami Vivekananda's last lecture on 9/11, 1890, no, not 9/11, but in September of 1893, at the Parliament of World Religions, he said Buddhism is the fulfillment of Hinduism. Just think about what that means. The Buddha had attained the highest. I'm just going to come out and say it. Like, this is the highest realization. The Buddha had the highest possible realization. Like, he's arguably, I mean, like, if you go anywhere in the world, you're going to see a statue of the Buddha there, right? People don't even know who this guy is, but they're willing to put up a statue of him in their garden or in their bathroom or in their living room. Think about the Buddha and think about the Buddha as India's greatest cultural export. Because it's true, what the Buddha realized, like, it was the best that India had to offer, and what is it? I mean, we read it in tantric terms. We say what the Buddha realized is that this is God. That there's no God beyond this present moment, and this person that is appearing before you, have thou no gods but this. This is your God. And like your worship is the service of this person. But you know what happened? In the years that followed the Buddha, we lost that bhakti. The Buddha taught us to worship God in man, but as a result of I would argue, misinterpretation and mishandling of some of these teachings, we forgot God. And now, what do we even make of man? Like, that's the thing. Like, you don't understand persons until you understand God. But we just lost God. Like, somewhere in the mix, we lost the bhakti and fervor and power that the Buddha brought, that many of his great saints brought, that you can even see in the modern masters who are so devotional. The Buddha was a bhakta, filled with devotion. But his God was the immanent God. And that was Swamiji's God too. And so for me, the Buddha is the ultimate Shakta, right? Like as a Shakta, Mahakarana. Like look at him. Look at his life. Look at Shankara's life. Did they sleep? I don't think they had time for naps. A lot of people think he's so peaceful. I think if you met him, you get a very different picture. He was always up and moving. He was always doing. When we learn about his life, we see that he's traveling a lot. He's giving lots of talks. Think about his last day. What did the Buddha do with his last hour on earth? It's really worth thinking about, actually, because you would imagine that he would be sitting calm in some white person's garden, embodying serenity and peace. You would think that he would be merging into samadhi. Nothing of the sort. He was giving a talk to a stranger, right? Like the last thing that he felt was worth doing with his life was worshiping God, the person, who was just some random fuck who had shown up at that morning, like asking for his presence. And like it's not like what does he have to gain from it? What does he have to lose? He's the Buddha. Shouldn't he be communing with God? Shouldn't he be like in samadhi? No, he felt like the best thing he could do with that last hour, as he's racked with pain from the food poisoning, he felt like the best thing he could do was just give this guy a lesson. And by the way, it's probably a boring lesson. It was probably like a basic lesson, like Buddhism 101. Probably not. Buddha's teaching, arguably, if we take obviously we don't know what the fuck he taught, right? Like we only know hundreds of years after the fact what we thought he taught. But it seems like his teaching develops. Maybe as the Sangha develops, the teachings develop. But when we look at the Buddha himself, it's conceivable that he would have been thinking new thoughts as he continued in his journey. And so on his last day, he might have had some really cool Vajrayana shit to talk about. Like he probably might have had some really cool tantric stuff to explore. He might have even revealed Manjushri or something like that. Or like, he might have talked about Padma Sambhava and his next incarnation, all the things. He could have talked about so many things, but instead, he just talked about the basics. Allegedly, he just went back to level 1, just like, these are the 5 bhutas, and here are the 5 tanmatras. And like, he was fine teaching a simple lesson, because to him, that was religion, just what you do for the person in front of you. Okay, so now we have Swamiji's ideal, which is the Buddha's ideal, and we have Ramakrishna, who is worshipping Ma Kali. Here's the claim that we make. It's literally the same thing. What you do in front of your altar to Ma Kali is as good as what you do in front of someone else at your workplace. Neither is better or worse than the other. But if you want to think of them hierarchically, you can think of them in this way. To get Vivekananda, you need Ramakrishna. In other words, you need to realize God first in order to be able to worship God in people. But to get Ramakrishna, you need Vivekananda. Because in this day and age, when you don't have all day and all night to do it, one of the bestest, swiftest ways to realize God is to start seeing her in every person that you meet. So they come together, you see. You can start at any point and you'll end up at the other point. You can start by worshiping humans and you'll end up with God. Or you can start with God and you'll end up with humans because the two are really one. Shiva, Shakti, Abhed. Brahma, Shakti, Abhed. So here's what we suggest. Go ham with the puja. Like just really, really learn it. Because when you do, then when you serve people, it's easier to turn that into puja. For example, in a few moments, we'll learn the food offering mantras. You guys, I can go for all night tonight. Like I'm filled with, we can talk. So I'm gonna turn off the recording and then we'll get into our puja class and our Vijnana Bhairava class. As long as you're still standing, I'll be standing. But the question now is, why should I learn this stuff? Why should I learn all the mudras, etc., etc.? Probably because they will help you alchemize your day-to-day interactions into moments of God. Otherwise it would just be serving coffee at Starbucks. But what if you knew the Kriya? What if you knew the mantra? What if every day at your altar you practice the bhava and the jnana? Then only you would have done the work to turn that coffee at Starbucks into puja. So we would argue that Swami Vivekananda was not against puja because in one place he said, if an idol can make you into a Sri Ramakrishna, this is a thing that I was trying to say an hour ago and that led to this whole digression about Sri Ramakrishna's puja journey. But Swamiji once upon a time said, if you can become Ramakrishna as a result of worshipping one idol, then I say have 1,000 idols. Like if worshipping in a temple and chanting tantric mantras and doing puja can turn you into a Ramakrishna, by God, do it. And so Swami Vivekananda was not against puja. He just had this very broad vision that included puja, but of course also transcended it because not everyone has to do puja. The ones who want to do puja or who are lucky enough to learn it are indeed very lucky. But they're the kinds of people who want that. They're ritualistic already. You will find that many of you in this classroom, before you learn formal puja, have already been participating in ritual practices. Because you have that urge, the ritualism. But not everybody does. So is Sri Ramakrishna's message so small that it's only just for us, some 40 or so people in a room on a Thursday night on Zoom? No, obviously Swami Vivekananda's message is much broader than just puja, but it includes puja. And when we look at Swamiji himself, this is so interesting. There's a lot that he says in public that is good for the world. He even said so. He said, what is universal I have taught. But when we look at his life, we see that there are things that applied to him that he didn't teach, like Kali worship. We all know that famous story. I don't need to repeat it, of when he experienced Mother on that fateful Tuesday night when he was a kid. And that's when he accepted Mother. Where before he said how I used to hate Kali and her ways. And after that night, he became her slave. But we also know that he went to Shir Bhavani and he was fond of performing homas. And we know that in Shir Bhavani, he performed havans, homas to the Divine Mother Kali, like all night long, all day long. And so he was fond of doing pujas also. When at Belrumat, it was time for him to worship. He had a very peculiar way of worshiping. He would just hold the flowers, go into samadhi, and then after a while he would come out and just throw all the flowers on the altar, and that would be it. So he was a very eccentric pujari. One time, it was time for him to do the puja. Everyone was sitting and meditating in the temple, and instead of worshiping Sri Ramakrishna, he got up, came outside, and started putting flowers on the heads of everyone meditating. You see what I mean? It's like when you do puja, and when you have this Swamiji Kaula, I'm going to argue Kaula Bhava of seeing God in this world as this world, the two come together very nicely. Your puja becomes the fervent worship of God in the person as the person, in the way that the person most needs. But for you, it won't feel like work. For you, you will get the same joy serving the Starbucks coffee or giving a $20 note to like a homeless person as you would giving Shiva his Panchamrita puja or something like that. So like when you learn puja, we learn how to love. We learn how to interact with one another and be in the world. So in Denver, actually, we were doing lots of talks on puja and demonstrating puja. And there were some people who had attended in Denver who actually had never been in that setting before. And later, they had said to me, thank you for showing me how to revere the people I love. And I thought that person really got it. Because it's not really about worshiping God in an image. It's about learning how to love and how to revere, how to hold something sacred and how to treat it as such. And so when every day you practice cultivating sacredness, just imagine the kind of person that you will be in the world. The ability to see the beauty and reverence that in others. Like that's what we mean when we talk about karma yoga. So I have in mind now, one of my favorite images is the image of Akhandananda Swami. Nobody liked to work in that ashram because nobody could sleep in that ashram. Abhedanandaji was one of Swamiji's darlings. Swamiji loved him so much because he was mad with this ideal of serving God and man. So he would teach children. And you know how this happened, right? You have to know this story. It's crazy. Swami Abhedananda wanted to go to Tibet. He was obsessed with Tibet, probably because in some previous life, maybe he was a yogi in Tibet. I don't know. He was obsessed with Tibet. He was trying to get to Tibet, the icy regions of Tibet, so he could meditate. It's a fascinating story. One time he got there and he passed out in the snow and the cold because he didn't prepare for Tibet. He didn't bring clothes for that cold. So he got hypothermia and he passed out. Then lamas, Vajrayana, Tibetan Buddhist, found him. And it's a really interesting story. They revived him and then he showed them a picture of Sri Ramakrishna and they said, this one is a Buddha. He said, you can trust us. We know. We're Buddhist monks. So like there was something in Sri Ramakrishna's look. And by the way, I saw a picture recently, not recently, some years ago, but somewhat recently, relatively speaking, of a particular Saltrim Gyatso Rinpoche, and the look is uncanny. When you look into the eyes of of that level of spiritual aspirant, it's like, oh my God, it's like that's Ramakrishna's face, like, and those Buddhist lamas, they knew it when they saw a picture of Ramakrishna. They kept it also. They kept that picture of Swami Abhedananda's picture of Ramakrishna. So that's this interesting, fascinating adventure that Swami Abhedananda had in Tibet. Anyway, Swami Abhedananda only ever wanted to sit in a cave and meditate and be in samadhi. But one day, on his way to Tibet, on another one of his adventures to the Himalayas to Tibet, he was passing through a village and he saw a little girl with a pot and she was getting water from a well, and then she dropped the pot and broke it and started weeping. So Swami Abhedananda went up to her and he was like, "Oh, what's the matter, child?" And she said, "You see, this is the only pot that my family owns, and I've broken it. And now we have no way of collecting water. I'm in so much trouble." So Swami Abhedananda was so moved by this that he took a few coins out of his pocket, what little he was able to get from begging in other towns, and he gave it to this girl to buy a new pot. She was so happy. Obviously, she told all her friends, and before long, all these young kids were all surrounding Swami Abhedananda and pulling at his. You know how it is in India. You give somebody a little bit of money, they're all there. But he was moved. So he went to a sweets shop, and with what remainder money he had, he bought some sweets and gave it to all the kids. Now, one of the kids said to him that his mother was in trouble and she needed help. So Swami Abhedananda followed the kid back to the mother's house, where the mother was sick and covered in all her own feces and just like no one was there to take care of her. So Swami Abhedananda carefully undressed her, bathed her, clothed her, fed her, just like did everything he could for her in that moment. And she said to him, "My boy, you're strange. You're just a stranger in that town," he said. And it's a Muslim town, by the way. So all these people are Muslims, just so you know, probably. And he's a Hindu monk in a Muslim town, undressing, bathing, and caring for a Muslim woman. It's like transcending all these caste ideas. So then she says to him, "My child, you must have been my son in a previous life." And he said, "Mother, why not in this life? Am I not your son in this life?" And that when he said that, like it broke it, like something changed in him. And he realized, like, this is my mother, actually. It's my actual mother. My mother is here and she's covered in shit. And I would have just gone to the Himalayas and no one was here to take care of her. And that changed his whole outlook. And he stayed in that village forevermore. It's really remarkable. He started an ashram in that village and just stayed there for the rest of his life and just did good works for the people in that village. Can you imagine? Swami Abhedananda. Anyway, the brahmacharis at Belrumat really didn't want to go there because if Abhedananda got you and if you were stationed there, good luck. Say goodbye to sleep. Like he was such a hard taskmaster. Anyway, this is Abhedananda. And there's a scene, I love this scene so much, of Abhedananda bathing a Muslim boy. So imagine a little naked Muslim boy, dusty, no one's giving him a bath, he's an orphan, and Abhedananda is standing there with a pot of water, because it's like buckets, you take these buckets from the well or from the river and you just bathe. He's standing there and he's pouring the water on the head of the Muslim boy, and guess what? He's chanting. Sahasra Sheshaha Purushaha Sahasraksha Sahasrapat Sa Bhumim Vishvato Vritvatya Tishtha Dashangulam. This is a mantra from the Vedas which we use to bathe Vishnu. When we bathe the image of Vishnu, the Shalagram, this is the mantra that we chant. So there is Abhedananda doing his karma yoga, but he knows exactly what he's doing. He's not bathing a dusty Muslim boy as a humanitarian thing so that he can like post about it on Instagram and be like such a like great white savior or something like that. That's not what he's doing. He's worshiping God in that boy. And that's why it's appropriate for him to chant the mantras that you would chant in a puja context when you do worship God. But if you don't know those mantras, if you don't know those kriyas, if you don't know those bhavas, if you don't know those jnanas, then what will you do? You'll just help humans. Is that what you help humans? What a sad thing to live your life helping humans. It's not the worst thing, but would have missed the point, you know. Humanitarian action, good works, that would have been missing the point. You'll get to the end of your life and you'll realize you've done nothing for anybody. You take one starfish and throw it into the ocean, some shark will eat it. I'm telling you, there's like no good that you can do in this world. It's like straightening a dog's curly tail. God's curly tail. This world is God's curly tail. And if there's anything that Swamiji wanted to teach us, it's to shake us out of this savior complex. You can't help anybody. And you know why? It's so futile to try to help anyone because there aren't any people in this world. Right? Like when you say, I want to help other people, already you've committed the ultimate transgression of knowledge. You've forgotten the one basic primordial fact, and that is God, for him to be God, must be infinite. And for God to be infinite, she must be non-dual. And if she's non-dual, then where is there room for you or me or anyone else? And so whatever you do to anyone is for God alone. Does God need your macaroni and cheese? Does she need your $20 bill? Does she need you to bathe her? Absolutely not. She's God. She can do all of that by herself if she wanted to. She could free you right now if she wanted to. You know? But why then? Why does Sri Ramakrishna appear? Why does she come as this scary cremation ground deity? Like, what is going on here? If God could just, with one wave of her hand, change all of this, why is there so much suffering? And only worshippers of Kali will ever understand, probably, the meaning of this suffering, the joy of this suffering, the rasa of this suffering. Who dares misery love? So your job in this world is not to end misery. You can never do that. Misery is her lila. Your job is not to overcome death and create perpetual life. You will never do that. She delights in death. Your job is not to build institutions and create structures that will last. Whatever utopia you set up, she will wreck. Thank God Atlantis sank. I would shrink it again and again and again. If I could push a button and obliterate your best utopic civilizations, I would again and again and again. Because destruction is the name of the game. Death is her dance, and misery is her favorite flavor. So those who worship Kali will understand that there is no cure for the misery of the world. You will never solve poverty. You will never solve AIDS. You will never end war. There will never be peace. Don't you understand? You can never end misery. You can never build structures that are safe from destruction, and you can never overcome death. What then is the solution? Constant battle, constant defeat, because that's what romance requires. That's what loving Kali requires. So by getting rid of all these vain and foolish ideas of helping people, of building anything, that's why I detest missions. Detest them. Because who do you think you are? You know, like this is mother's world, you know, relax. So then what will we do? Are we building institutions? Are we starting organizations? God forbid. Kill me before this becomes an organization or a mission, before we start using self-aggrandizing language of all the good work we are doing. There's no good work. There is only work. And let's fucking get to it. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Swami Vivekananda Arpanam Astu Jai Vireshwara Shiva Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ki Jai.